Sword of Coming Chapter 907. Yu Dynasty Luo Jing. Dayuan, a Jindan monk from the Qingzhou sect, just returned from the palace. During the carriage passed by the magnificent Jitsue temple, this Jindan from the Yu dynasty was enshrined, and he did not expect to be able to enjoy the beauty of the country. The female national teacher, what kind of relationship does it have? I don't have enough realm and I really have to knock on the door to visit. It's not enough to eat closed doors, but what's the point of drinking tea and having an eye addiction? What's more, Lu Bailong's path is extremely deep, and his origin is unknown, so Dayuan dare not control his eyes. Putting down the car curtain, Dayuan sighed, somehow I miss xianxia's fellow Taoist Narcissus. Only Dayuan did not notice that there was a young man in white clothes holding a green bamboo stick, who was actually lying on the top of the carriage with Erlang's legs upright, as if protecting Dayuan's road. The royal worship of the Yu dynasty is divided into insider and outsider, which is roughly equivalent to the named and unnamed guest of the xianxia school. And Dayuan is one of the insider worship. The ranking is not too high, but there is a good ancestor on the mountain. Gao Taishu is the second worship of the dynasty, second only to the true protector of the country. There are 2 golden cores within one mountain. In Tonggishao, where feng shui is now withered, not to mention walking horizontally, walking diagonally is always possible. Because of the New Year's Eve, there was a heavy snowfall of goose feathers. It is said that a lot of poor people who were naked in their clothes were frozen to death in the place, and the old emperor was busy committing crimes again. His own martial arts in his early years went to a patron house in the old Longqing of Aquarius. He was a gentleman from Xuanhu Academy who was born in the Ho family. Because of his outstanding achievements in the battlefield of Old Dragon City, he has now been promoted to the deputy head of Wuxia Academy in the south of Tonggishao. Dayuan was at the Tapingshan site. Not only did he return in vain, but he sent his hand to the Taoist Mo from the Song dynasty, and he was lucky to get back a small life. And Xiaolongqia's chief Keqing Lao Yuan Ingzhang Luzhu, so many spectacles in the past, really did not look for nothing. There are difficulties together. On the side of Gao Zushi and the old emperor of the Yu family, Dayuan fooled the past with his own words and methods. Gao Shuwen famously said that he would not leave any hidden dangers. After careful inspection of Dayuan's injuries, nothing was found. The old emperor was kind and asked the envoy to select a rare mountain artifact from the treasury and reward Dayuan, which means that he has no credit and hard work. The first emperor of the Yu dynasty, that is, the son of today's son, called himself emperor with the wild demon clan in the troubled times when the ritual and music collapsed, but he was actually stunned. As for how the assassin crossed the heavily guarded capital, and how did he sneak into the palace and finally succeeded in taking the emperor's head, it was an unsettled case on the Baron Army account. Anyway, this tragedy was banned by the Wild Army. When the war ended, you returned to Guizhou. Rumor has it that an old palace lady missed the news that it was you, the founding emperor of the world on horseback, who had died. Here came that night, black clouds covered the moon, and the wind blew down countless flowers and trees, and only heard the horseshoes. I saw the Emperor Taizu sitting high on horseback, holding a spear and rushing in with one ride. After arriving at the palace, a spear smashed down, still puzzled by hatred, another spear, even the man with a quilt beat that unscrupulous descendant into 3 pieces. In short, the more the spread, the more evil, so every time Dayuan enters the palace to see His Majesty the Emperor, he always feels a bit gloomy, not a place to stay for long. Dayuan is on the mountain with successful cultivation. Of course, he is not afraid of ghosts but of death. This time when entering the palace, Dayuan received a decree from the great patriarch. He needed to invite His Royal Highness and concubine to visit the old place again. There is a white jade cave on the top of my mountain. Enjoying snow in the city of Baiyu Mountain is the prestigious beauty of Tonggishao. Actually, Dayuan knew that it was the old emperor who saw that he was going to die. After another half a year, he was about to ride a crane to the west. Of course, he was lying down at the foot of the mountain. The true guardian Lu Bilong, no matter how proficient in alchemy, is estimated to be powerless and destined to be unable to prolong the emperor's life. There is a person at the house in Old Longqing, who is now on his hillside, waiting for the new emperor and empress of the Yu dynasty in the future. However, the reason why the Qingzhou school is so popular is that not only Dayuan came to Luojing, but also the ancestor Gao Shuwen went with him. It was also because there came a powerful force that was even more powerful than the Ho family in the mountains. It was not only rich and powerful. It is said that even that half came. There are several immortal soldiers, and they are related by marriage to Yunlin Jiang's family. It is Fu Nanhua from the Fu family in Old Longqing. This person traveled across continents to the south to visit the Qingzhou school. Dai Yuan took out a bright yellow dragon print brocade box from his sleeve. It was the craftsmanship of the imperial palace. After opening the box, it contained a colored ink ingot previously given by the old emperor, drawing the true shape of the 5 mountains. It can be regarded as a defensive treasure similar to a talisman. The true spirits of the 5 mountains are blessed with power and can be directly used as medicine. Only because of one-time consumption, it cannot be ranked as a magic treasure. Dai Yuan's fingers rubbed the ink ingots, worrying, and it was a coincidence. It was the ink ingot, which made the insider consecrate can't help but think of the Qingshan sword immortal who appeared in Taiping Mountain. It was to win, kill or slash, and it was better to be able to tell you what it was. It was better than being so fearful now. If the other party only relies on swordsmanship and wants to kill himself, Dai Yuan will bite the bullet and go to the academy to complain. Whether it is looking for Qinmu Academy or Dafu Academy, how can he get a life-saving talisman for himself? Presumably that sword the immortal was unwilling to slaughter a golden pill with no grievances and no grudges, so he paid the price of being detained by the academy or the Zhongtu Confucian temple. Therefore Dai Yuan was afraid that the sword fairy who claimed to be Yugue Zong Keqing did not pay attention to the sword fairy style and played with himself. After all, a monk on the mountain who can be called brother to Jiang Shangzhen, can he be a gentleman who behaves in a lawful and upright manner? What's more, the other party also said, maybe one day they will go to the Qingzhou school to visit him. You are here, and Fang Liangming is generous, otherwise he will learn from the female crown Huang Ting and ask the sword with the Qingzhou school guardian formation. Dai Yuan regretted his intestines and murmured, you shouldn't go to the Taiping Mountain to wade in the muddy waters. If you knew this before, you would rather break your legs and stay on the mountain. Although the reputation of the Yu family is completely rotten, after all, the foundation of the Yu dynasty is still there. After the restoration of Guizhou, the territory has not decreased but increased. Now Tonghishao has named one of the top 10 powerful countries selling melons. The Yu dynasty was among them and the ranking was not low, so it was in the middle. Therefore the important civil and military ministers, one by one, had beaten up their blood and openly threatened to fight for 3 and 10 years. Now the third strongest country is the Dechong dynasty that produced a famous romantic style. I heard that this young minister of the Ministry of Industry has changed his mind. In the past years he was really a good official by him. The winner is of course the Dequan Yao family who has no suspense. Yes, civil and military of course, all hope that the best ranking is second only to the Dequan dynasty. Dai Yuan was slanderous, not to mention that he could not do it even if it is really ranked second. What's the matter? The ranking is close to the Yao family of Dequan. Our Yu dynasty, can we be like a man, close to the buttocks of the allure Yao female emperor? Back then he followed Gao Zushi to participate in the Taoya League, but he heard a gossip with a nose and eyes, saying that the fox-charming stunner, the unparalleled Dequan empress, when she was just young on the way to Beijing, early and a foreign man I have been privately determined for life. Also said that the man actually came from a poor background, and he was not a cultivator. He deceived the future female emperor's body by means of rhetoric. Dai Yuan was sitting in the carriage, cheating, envious of the old man. I don't know which little who smoked from his ancestral grave had this affair. Don't let Lao Tzu see him, otherwise he will smash it with a tactic aiming at the crotch of the guy. Let the guy go directly into the palace as an errand. The carriage stopped, and Dai Yuan had a house in Luojing that was personally given by His Majesty. The previous master was a minister of ceremonies. It was rumored that he was getting too old and was frightened again. He belched in the green seals. In fact, it was the old man who was running on the battlefield with the 2 horses, when he accidentally caught the wind. Dai Yuan stepped out of the carriage and was suddenly surprised. He saw an illustrious man outside the door. What he wanted to do. It seems that his luck has been good recently. Is it true that he has come? A love can't be restrained. Dai Yuan didn't say anything politely, and walked forward quickly, reaching out to hold the old Yuaning's hand. Brother Zhang. Old Yuaning was also a little moved, shaking his arm and said solemnly, Brother Dai. In the turmoil at the Tapingshan site, the 2 sides shared tribulations and fortunately for the rest of their lives. At this time this scene is truly touching, and it is not inferior to the villager who sees the villager, and his eyes are full of tears. In fact, beside the 2 a few steps away, there was a young man in white, with a bamboo stick on the floor, yawning, watching the 2 brothers with different surnames reminisce over there. Dai Yuan whispered, Brother Zhang, just going to the mansion to have a drink would be boring, isn't it? For feelings and reason, Dai Yuan should do the friendship of the landlord. Zhang Luzhu was silent and hesitated. Dai Yuan said, Brother Zhang, when you get to Luojing, just listen to me and go. Dai Yuan led Zhang Lu to pay attention to the new carriage and went to a fairy house in the capital called Lantern Riddle Museum. Among them there is Sanjiao Building, which is the highest building in the capital. It implies that the sun, the moon and the beauty are the most beautiful in the world. It is the first choice place for banquets held by Xiang Gongqing and the fairy master on the mountain. It is overcrowded all year round. If you want to go to the building temporarily to drink, you can only rely on a few money in your pocket. It is doomed. Make an appointment at least 1 month before. Position. It's just that Dai Yuan is the old patron of Sanzala, and he is also an insider's worship. The Green Seal sect is still the leader of a fairy house in a country, and he can drink whenever he goes there. This is also due to the violent death of the Emperor, the capital of the Yu dynasty. The buildings are almost intact and not destroyed by the monsters. When Dai Yuan came on the way, he used 2 paper kites to spread the letter, calling 2 younger sisters from other sections. They are all regular guests of the Qingzhou school. On the Lhujing side 2 fairies, but every year there is a rake, and Dai Yuan is in the Qingzhou school, and he is in charge of 2 of the 4 great attractions. In addition to a green pearl well with a lot of money, there is also a sword tree, but the latter is just a tree. Hanging a sword fairy with a saber, there is no money to make. On the top of Fuxin, Dai Yuan asked them if they had time to come to the Lantern Riddle Hall for a drink. In addition to himself, there was a close friend on the mountain. Dai Yuan entered the Lantern Riddle Hall, but instead of heading straight to the noisy Sanjiao building, he was led by a well-acquainted young female repairman to a good place for quiet in the noisy, quite wild. I saw 2 huts, surrounded by a bamboo fence, and there was an acre of clear pond in front of the door, planted with lotus flowers. The female's dress fits her dress and her waist is swaying. She talks to Yen Yen with 2 fairy teachers along the way. Sitting with Zhang Luzhu under the grape rack, Dai Yuan wanted the female repairman to get the best wine from the Lantern Riddle Museum, but Zhang Luzhu said that it was unnecessary. He took out 2 pots of wuxia wine from his sleeve, the female repairman in charge. Knowing Dai Insider's preferences, Qiubua turned around and asked Dai Yuan if he needed to arrange for a few young people in the Lantern Riddle Hall by himself. Dai Yuan smiled and waved his hand saying no. Before the female cultivator left, she only said that she had any needs and said hello to her. It was obvious that as long as Dai Yuan spoke, it was all right to let her stay with her. The vine is obviously a fairy family flower and tree. At the end of the year it is still green and full of fruits. Pour 2 glasses of wine. The wine glasses on the table are very elegant and exquisite imitation flower cups. After taking a sip of wuxia wine and complimenting the taste of the drink, Dai Yuan asked quietly while there was no one around, "I heard that the master disciple of Jindingwen, who is a true Taoist, is now in retreat and is expected to become a nascent soul? There is also the gossip, saying that this Xuanhuan received a treasure of Jinshan from the Lord Du Guan, and he was exposed to the dragon spirit of the De Quan Yao family. Only in just 20 years can he break through the borders smoothly and win the sky. Good location and friendly people." Zhang Luzhu said with a smile, but a smile. It's a pity that such a young and promising Yuanying Dixian would not go to the Zhuidequan Yao family to help the dragon. Lao Yuanying was born in Yeshio. In this life he looked down on these genealogical immortals who took the most advantage. For example, as the head of the Qingzhou school, Gao Shuwen, Zhang Luzhu was quite unpleasant. Dai Yuan chuckled and said, "If you can really enter the Zhuidequan, marrying the female emperor, helping the dragon day by day, and suppressing the dragon night by night, it would be an enviable blessing for everyone. Good wine words are like a broomstick for sorrow." When Zhang Lu made a toast, Dai Yuan immediately lifted the wine glass and touched it lightly and drank each one. Dai Yuan asked in a low voice, "Brother Zhang came to Luojing this time as the chief of Xianxia. He has something to discuss with the old emperor, or?" Zhang Lu said with a joke and said in his heart, "Entrusted by others, I want to talk to you about a business, brother, let me sell it first. In short, it's a blessing in disguise. Just drink with ease." Dai Yuan heard the blessing in disguise, as if he had taken a reassurance pill. He really didn't worry about asking the reason, but he kept talking with Chief Zhang to persuade him to drink, and they talked about the recent landscape in Tonggishao. Zhang Luzhu deliberately or unconsciously asked about the current situation of the Qingzhuan school. Dai Yuan knew everything about the secrets of the mountain. If Zhang Luzhu was still a wild cultivator, how could Dai Yuan dare to be so frank? But since Zhang Lu note that now that change evil and return to righteousness has become Xiaolongqia's chief guest, it is no longer appropriate to return to his old career. Otherwise Zhang Luzhu will only outweigh the gains, so Dai Yuan need not be too taboo. It's just that Dai Yuan was a little bit guilty. Zhang Luzhu was so concerned about the income of Luzhujing and the Bayushan city, and he asked quite in detail. Could it be xianxia's current power Qingqiu who wants Zhang Luzhu Lai explores the style with myself? Intends to form an alliance with the Qingzhou school, such as the few Xinjia ferry boats that gather 2 hills to join in business? Less than half of the incense kung fu, Zhang Luzhu stopped speaking, turned his head and looked around, and his eyes suddenly brightened. 2 female cultivators who don't know their sect for the time being, one is thin and the other is slender, each has its own merits. The former has a beautiful appearance, a melon-seeded face, a slow walk, and a slender waist that is not full, which will make the old Yuanying worry about whether it will be twisted. As for the latter, it is even more so that the old Yuanying can't move his eyes at first sight. In the words of that dog thief Jiang Shangzhen, she was walking towards me like 2 big mountains hitting me. The old Yuanying sighed in her heart. If there is a bedclothes fight, the old man will undoubtedly lose. So many mirror flowers and water moons are not for nothing. Dai Yuan knew the taste of this predecessor Yuanying for a long time, so he beckoned to let the thin female cultivator sit next to him, and the plump genealogy fairy saw the chapter at first. Luzhua, her face was as usual, but her heart was full of sadness. This Dai insider, why did she call such an old thing to drink together today, really embarrassed herself. Just thinking of Dai Yuan's identity background, she had to force a smile, glancing at the cup-holding hand of the old monk. Fortunately, it was not the same as the dry palms of the vulgar old man under the mountain. Instead, there was a little white jade shining light, which made the female sister a little surprised. Could it be a land fairy with golden branches and jade leaves? Today's Yu dynasty there are 3 mainstays of the country, Luo Jing's Jitsue Guan, and the protector of the country LV Bilong. The Taoism is unfathomable. There is another great general, Huang Shansho, who is a martial artist in the remote travel realm. This man was born in a poor family. He started in the early days and was born as a young man. Now he has nothing to do with him. And the only thing that the Yu dynasty can get to the stage now is that the general was regarded as a stubborn resistance with a pebble hitting the stone, because Huang Shansho did not follow the old emperor and the others in exile and went to the secret of the Qingzhou school. Yes, but gathered a spirit horse, wandered around the old mountains and rivers, and fought with the wild monsters many times. Although the casualties were heavy, this soldier and horse never broke apart. This person is the jade in this pit of the Yu dynasty. This was the blatant words of a new deputy head of Tianmu Academy, and he made no secret of his disdain for the entire Yu dynasty and his unique look at the military commander. In the end, it was the Qingzhou school that Dai Yuan was in. Therefore, when she heard the predecessor of the Taoist Narcissus, she turned out to be the chief guest of Xianxiu, who had never seen her name for a long time, and the old of Yuanying, her posture became softer and softer. With weak muscles and bones, when kneeling and toasting, one thigh intentionally or unintentionally, is slightly close to the old Yuanying. The woman wore a silk and satin robe and she was sitting on her knees, so the curve was tight and the touch was slightly cool, but the old Yuanying was hot. Drinking 3 rounds, drunk, Dai Yuan hugged the woman around her waist, while the fairy beside Zhang Luzhu had already been nestled in the arms of the old god, taking a mouthful of brother Zhang. It's just a long trip out this time. Zhang Luzhu is not a tour of the mountains and water. Luo Jing, who came to get in touch with the flowers and provoke the grass, today's meal of the little flower wine under the grape rack is just a fake business for private purposes. Otherwise Zhang Luzhu would have already held a cup in one hand, and went to the white and fatty peaks and ridges to search for something with the other hand. It turned out that before Qin Jianxian left the wild garden that night, he had privately confessed to Zhang Luzhu, saying that he was polite. A Taoist friend of Lao Shuixian took a trip to the Yu dynasty to find that Dai Yuan, who was an insider, to talk about the past, and help say hello to him. The relationship with the Qingzhou school is still incomparable, but Dai Yuan, who is the insider of the Yu clan, is not acquainted with each other, so he will see if there is a chance to help Dai Yuan in the Yu clan's dynasty. In the Shanshui officialdom here we are making progress. To be honest, Zhang Luzhu is a little envious of Dai Yuan's status as an insider. Unlike himself, he can only be the chief guest officer in Xianxiu. So that on the way to Luojing, Zhang Luzhu began to think about whether he could discuss with the next Xiaolong Qiushan leader, and let himself find a similar, national teacher, in a certain mountain dynasty that has successfully restored the country. Identity? For example, among the 10 countries selected by Tonggishao today, choose a great dynasty that temporarily lacks top combat power, just like the Dechong dynasty that is waiting to be flourished. It seems that the current position of the national teacher is still vacant? Dai Yuan is only a golden core, but he is a real nascent soul. Once it's done, wouldn't it be beautiful? By then I will become the new national teacher of the Dechong dynasty, and Xinjianxian will be the backer, a continent of mountains and rivers. Who would dare to underestimate my chapter? Think him from a wrong background? A sword fairy who can make the Middle-earth immortals be respectful and give way to 3 points. This thigh I am hugged. After drinking a light flower wine, although Dai Yuan was very surprised, he still listened to Zhang Luzu's heartfelt reminder that the two sides were finally about to get to the point, and the 2 stunners had to leave first, and they were not required to continue drinking with them for the time being. The plump woman is really clever and well-behaved. She is not at all entangled and crooked. She is just empathetic and asks whether they need to go to the mansion where the insider is to wait for a drink. Dai Yuan got Zhang Luzu's heartfelt voice and agreed with her with a smile. When the 2 genealogy female cultivators were far away, Zhang Luzu instantly disappeared, full of drunkenness. His eyes were clear and abnormal, and he changed his body to become a domineering senior Yuaning and said with heart, Dai Yuan, next I don't divulge any word you say, whether it's your ancestor Gao Shuwen or the court of Yes family. Today's discussion, God knows, you know, and I know. In the vast world, don't underestimate any Shanzai Xiu who has worked so hard to climb to the nascent soul realm. This is common sense. Dai Yuan saw the peculiar expression of that chapter flow, and immediately knew the importance of it. He hurriedly suppressed his smile and ridiculed his lips, sat up in a dreadful manner and reverently said, Chief Zhang, please say that the younger generation listens thoroughly. Zhang Luzu said the words that Qin Jianxian had confessed to him. Dai Yuan looked attentively and did not dare to miss a word. After listening to it he was overjoyed, but he was a little nervous and jealous for a while. Tsong, this is considered a pie in the sky and has picked up a lot of landscape prospects for nothing? Is there such a good thing in the world? The sword fairy, who had a fierce shot and a deep city mansion, had a blue eye for himself. Isn't the other party making a mistake, coveting the rich ancestors of the Qingzhou school? Is it possible that Zhang Luzu had already negotiated with the sword immortal in private, and it was not suitable for an open dispute, so he came to steal it? Will I be busy, and after all I won't say anything about the bamboo basket, but I still want to become a sinner who eats inside and out of the Qing seal pie? Zhang Luzu seemed to have guessed Dai Yuan's thoughts. He twisted the imitation flower cup in front of him, gently lifted it with 2 fingers, and then slammed the table, squinting his eyes and said with a smile, Qin Jianxian finally gave it back. There are 2 sentences let me give Brother Dai. The first sentence is not to toast or not to eat or fine wine. If you get a bargain you will still be good. Dai Yuan smiled bitterly, his heartstrings tense. Zhang Luzu paused for a moment and continued to say the second sentence. I saw Dai Yuan, not to discuss with him whether to do something, but to teach him how to behave. Dai Yuan only drank a pot of Longqiu immortal brew, but at this time he was full of bitterness and for a while he did not know how to answer. The old brother Zhang in front of him is already an ally on a thief ship with that Qingshan Jianxian. Zhang Luzu restored his smiling face and slowly said, Brother Dai, don't think too much. This Qin Jianxian in our Tongyi's Hao, there is a genealogical monk of the sect head, there is no reason and there is no need to cheat a golden core monk. The 3 academies in Tongyi's Hao are not furnishings. Dai Yuan was in a panic, pondered for a moment with a smile on his face and tentatively asked, Brother Zhang, can you talk to me? That sword fairy really is not coveting the Qingshan school's family business, not let me win the insider who betrays the teacher and guards and steals? Zhang Luzu sneered, and he didn't even bother to say a word of explanation with Dai Yuan. Both of them were friends of Feng Yuekang. Dai Yuan was so ignorant and stupid. It's no wonder that he is the golden core genealogy of a hopeless infant. If he is in the wilderness the casual repair of the dog's food, so indecisive and ignorant of the general situation, would have long since died. Zhang Luzu turned the wine glass upside down and placed it on the table above the table. I have already brought all the words and I have said everything. Do not listen to you, Brother Dai. I'm an old brother. Finally, I would like to remind you that this kind of gift is free of good deeds that splash the sky in wealth. I don't know how to cherish it. After passing this village there will be no such shop. I will only regret it too late. Dai Yuan gritted his teeth and said, Done. What really made Dai Yuan make up his mind was to hear that the sword fairy came from a certain Tongyi's Hao sect. As long as it is not the kind of one-handed sale of the sword, Dai Yuan will be a little relieved. Otherwise Dai Yuan is really worried about the bleak end of being inside and outside, not to mention the inside worship of the Yu dynasty. I am afraid that even the ancestors, the genealogical identity cannot be kept. When the Dongchuang incident occurs, Gao Shuwen is aware of this. With the ancestors' disposition and methods, he will never let himself live as a wild cultivator. Zhang Luzu laughed with an arrogant expression. I really didn't know that Qin Jiangxian, who looked like a dragon going out to sea and imaginative, had seen Daiyuan. It was obviously a thing that didn't deserve to carry shoes for that Qin Jianxian. Zhang Lu focused on the newly flipped wine glass. Daiyuan immediately leaned forward, lifted the wine jug to help fill it, and poured himself a glass. Zhang Luzhu smiled and said, I won't talk about the empty talk. Anyway, regarding our brother's fate, we must work together and cooperate sincerely. Daiyuan held the cup in both hands and his eyes resolutely said, Brother Zhang, to be honest, I will treat all my wealth and life in this glass of wine. On the top of the grape rack, a head suddenly appeared, looked at Daiyuan and said, What's the matter with you Qingzhou school? You actually use the 1,000-li horse as a donkey? Isn't it a violent thing? Don't say that Daiyuan was frightened, but Zhang Luzhu almost couldn't hold it back. He directly sacrificed a defensive magic weapon and attacked his destiny. As for whether he would accidentally hurt Brother Dai, it was entirely God's will. Daiyuan looked up blankly, looking at the head hanging upside down on the grape rack. In the martial art, Daiyuan has no real power except for a green pearl well. The monks who are really in charge of the Qingzhou school are all cronies of the patriarch Gao Shuwen. The one who manages the money is the concubine of the old ancestor, except that she holds the wealth. Ku, this coquettish lady who doesn't take a straight look except the ancestor Gao, is also responsible for all matters in Bayushan City, and the discipline in charge is just an old monk in the Longmen realm with very ordinary qualifications, but he left Huanlongtan. This piece of fat, just because it is a direct disciple of the old ancestor Gao, is prestigious. When I see myself as the golden core immortal on weekdays, he always smiles and doesn't smile, taking a mouthful of his nephew Dai. Zhang Luzhu calmly asked, Where is this Taoist friend in Xinxiang? Dare to ask the Dao number? The white-clothed boy maintained that weird posture and said sincerely, I am Dongshan. Zhang Luzhu smiled and asked, So I don't know Dongshan Taoist friend, how long have you been here and how many have you listened to? The other party shook an edict in his hand, clattering, and said in a serious manner, I've come a moment before you, just now I was busy admiring this emperor's sin and self-decree. I didn't listen to any guards and self-pirates or late regrets. So there is no need to kill people. Zhang Luz's face is gloomy. Good guy Yin and Yang are so angry. The young man in white put the edict into his sleeve and smiled. Did Chief Zhang breathe a sigh of relief when I heard that I was here early? I think I am at most good at concealing body shape and energy. I really want to fight against it. I can fight. Hey, this is that Chief Zhang was too early to be happy because I lied to you. I followed you all the way into the Lantern Riddle Museum. Seeing you guys had a good chat, I couldn't bear to disturb, so I just had a rest on the grape shelf. For a moment, don't believe it? Then look at your feet, is there a small pile of grape seeds? Daiyuan immediately lowered his head to look, but Zhang Luzhu remained motionless. The two of them were only one ground cultivator, but this was the real gap between the genealogical celestial master and Yamazawa Yeshio. Zhang Luzhu pretends to be calm and smiles at his beard. This fellow Taoist really does not take an unusual path. A monk who can lie on the grape rack for a long time, he hasn't noticed it from beginning to end, absolutely invincible. Cui Dongshan turned his figure, grabbed the grape rack with both hands, fell to the ground, shaking his sleeves and leaning on a grape rack wooden post. Okay, I won't be in circles with you, I still have business to do. Cui Dongshan looked at the old Yuaning. My husband is worried that you will not be able to explain clearly and will superfluous on Daiyuan's side, so I let me go to Luojing this time. It turns out that the husband is right, and your Zhang Luzhu is indeed smart. It's okay. Now that I'm here, I can't help you two being confused or pretending to be confused. Cui Dongshan turned his head to look at that Daiyuan, and said straightforwardly, Daiyuan, do you want to be the 8th generation head of the Qingzhuan sect within 100 years? By the way, those who can do it will work harder to serve as a member of the Yu dynasty. The chief insider worship? Daiyuan looked embarrassed where the madman came ranting here. Cui Dongshan smiled and nodded when he saw that he was silent. Very well, just take it as your default. Ziyu Zhang Luzhu said, As for Chief Zhang, Xiaolonqius' official hat is already big enough. Feng is unqualified and he can't be the mountain lord. After all, he is an outsider and Yuli doesn't agree. Without Lin Huizhi he Quan Qingqiu, De Longqiu is not really unavailable anymore. Zhang Luz's face changed slightly. How could this person know about this secret matter of Xiaolonqius first class? Cui Dongshan smiled and said, My husband said, as a reward for your help on this trip to Luojing, he can help you be fair on Xiaolonqius' side, allowing you to retain the title of chief guest, and then go to the Chong dynasty seeks an official status such as a national teacher? So after you leave Luojing, You don't need to return to Xianxia immediately, and go straight to the Dechong dynasty. Go to the Ministry of Industry minister named Kai and say you are Zhou Fei's friend on the mountain is willing to temporarily serve him as a staff accountant for a few years. My husband asked me to remind you that I can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. I will spend a few years and patiently figure out the details of the officialdom of Dachong Temple, Chief Zhang. This is called? Chapter Lu Zhu immediately took the conversation and said, we don't cut the wood by mistake. A pot of Longqiu wine, the old Yuanying's heart was hot when he drank it, as if the great master of the great Chongguo was already in his pocket. As for the fellow Taoist who claims to be Dongshan, since he is Qin Jiangxian's proud student, he is half of his family. The key is that Qin Jiangxian paved the way like an unknown prophet, which happened to be what Zhang Luzhu thought. The thriving Dechong dynasty is the best dojo, where the old Yuanying most wants to go to show his skills. At the same time, Zhang Luzhu was more in awe of Qin Jiangxian, who seemed to be able to easily see through people's hearts. After contacting the incident in Xianxia's wild garden, Zhang Luzhu always had an illusion that Qin Jiangxian, who was a master of swordsmanship, seemed to be more like Yi Xiu in his technique and temperament. Turning his hands into the clouds and covering the hands as the rain, instantly let the two Yuanying genealogical monks of Xiaolongqiu become prisoners of the order, and now they are taken to the upper sect of the Middle Earth by the dragon immortal, life and death are unknown. Cui Dongshan nodded approvingly and said, you can teach you and the future is boundless. Then Cui Dongshan raised a sleeve and waved the lingering air of the woman's powdery air, and said, you two, both of you are very conspiring cultivators of the earth immortals. You have to be clean and self-conscious and you have to cultivate yourself. Especially with those female cultivators, drink less flower wine, fight with immortals, stay a little bit more vigorous and gain some reputation. Otherwise, a future master of the great Chongguo, the 8th generation head of the Qingzhou school, will be the greatest to outsiders. The impression is that it is actually that flower bush, which is a bit outrageous. Nowadays, on the Tonggishao mountain, the big is big and the small is small. Good things don't go out, but bad things are spreading thousands of miles. Daiyuan glanced at Zhang Luzhu. Zhang Luzhu sat in place without squinting. Cui Dongshan stretched out a finger and pointed at the two immortals. Mr. and I don't want the guests from the top of the mountain to be the heroes and heroes who have been mingled in the cheek powder cave, in the windy tent, and under the pomegranate skirt all the year round. Chapter Luzhu was a little sad and she cursed Daiyuan for misleading me. Before I met Daiyuan, the old man was notoriously diligent in practice. Where did I know half of a genealogical nun and fairy? Cui Dongshan clapped his palms and smiled. As Chief Zhang said just now, then the three of us will work together and cooperate sincerely? Zhang Luzhu and Daiyuan both got up and saluted, swearing to the heavens. Cui Dongshan finally shook his sleeves and said with a hippie smile, I also learned to superfluously learn from the chief of the chapter. I closed the door and said my own words. If you two dare to make mistakes again and again, someday I will disappoint my husband. He'll hit you half dead first, and then let you understand what life is better than death. Before Cui Dongshan left Xiandushan, his husband once asked a very interesting question. If you Guizhong Wei-ing secretly promised to give similar fame and fortune temptation, would the two of them wear the same fame and fortune, and will they be more determined? Cui Dongshan nodded and said yes. Mr. Smiled and said something which shows that people's hard work is far from reliable enough, anyway dripping through the rocks, slowly seeing the results. Two earth immortals, one golden pill is like a chilling cicada, and one Yuanying just says not to dare, and will never disappoint Qin Jiangxian's cultivation and trust. The boy in white clothes is like a cloud of white clouds, disappearing out of thin air. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth does not have the slightest ripple, coming and going without a trace. Under the grape frame, Zhang Luzhu and Daiyuan looked at each other. After a long silence, Daiyuan whispered, Brother Zhang, over my house, it's just our brothers who have a light tea, right? Otherwise. Zhang Luzhu did not have a good air. One in Gentle Township is a hero's tomb. It wastes the spirit of our generation of monks, and it is harmful to no benefit. Daiyuan nodded silently, blaming me. Zhang Luzhu said, I won't go to your house to drink tea, just continue drinking here. Let's think about it carefully and we have to figure out a general rule. Daiyuan's spirit was shocked and he immediately took a seat, poured a glass of wine to Zhang Luzhu and said cheerfully, Brother Zhang is still steady and we should discuss it carefully. The two land immortals who were in the same boat began to talk frankly, chatting and chatting. Even the Yu dynasty and the Dechong dynasty would have an eye for the future alliance. Indeed, it is more flavorful than drinking flower wine. Sure enough, A big man shouldn't indulge in the gentle township and seek a great cause. As a result, another head poked out from the grape rack and he couldn't stop it. It's really not that I said you two. What are you thinking about? What did you talk about? The widow cried at night? Zhang Luzhu and Dai Yuan are stiff, and when they look at each other they both feel weak and frustrated. Cui Dongshan took out 2 booklets from his sleeves and threw them on the wine table. You have a share, remember to read it a few times, memorize it and write 1,000 or 800 words after reading it. I want to go back to the school. Yours. The figure in white clothes disappeared again. 2 earthly immortal monks just like 2 Ming children from the school just got a copy of the classwork given by the husband. Speechless for a long time. Daiyuan asked with his eyes, is that guy gone? Zhang Luzhu replied with his eyes, you ask Lao Tzu who is going to ask, and ask the Master Cui who has a pit in his head? What about our brothers? It's not a problem to just stand up like this. Why look through that booklet? The 2 earth immortals with more and more eloquence, not to mention the words in the mouth, and without the need to communicate with each other, they sat down almost at the same time, immersed in reading. In the view of Jitsue, the old real person Liang Shuang turned his head and looked into the courtyard, dressed in white as if jumping out of the underground. He saw the female national teacher Lu Bilong. Hey, the old true talent has collected the diary and looked for Dao Lu. Liang Shuang is just a deaf ear. Could it be that the embroidered tiger Cui Yang was such a rascal when he was young? I have to ask Xiao Zhao later. Cui Dongshan dangled his sleeves, strode into the house, sat opposite Ma Xianhui, the female champion, staring at the full moon Lu Bilong. According to the secret records of the Yu dynasty, LV Bilong, a true protector of the country, was born as half a genealogical monk. She once practiced in a small national Taoist temple that is not well known. Because she has a pure heart and lacks desires, she wants to seek truth. After she was out of the Yuanying realm, she began to go out and wandering. When passing by the capital of the Yu dynasty, she saw that Jitsue Temple was a blessed place with rich Taoism, so she stopped here and got a Taoist certificate issued by the court, but she still didn't want to reveal her realm. When the troubled times came, she really didn't want to watch the Yu clans were cut off. She violated her heart and took the initiative to abandon her usual clean practice, barely hiding herself in the country and becoming a true guardian of the country. As for the small Taoist temple in that place, it certainly exists. The ritual archives and local county chronicles of the small country of the Yu clan are indeed clearly recorded. Even if the small Taoist temple has long been destroyed in the war, I believe it must be. There will be a female crown named Lu Bilong. The female national teacher felt very uncomfortable, but with the presence of the old real person with a strong identity, she did not dare to show an unpleasant look. A young man, who can ridicule the great celestial master outside Longhushan, how can she be a little Yuanying monk who can provoke him? Cui Dongshan opened his mouth and made Lu Bilong's heart tremble. Listen to my husband, you are actually born in the Wanyao sect of the Sanshan blessed land? Is that a chess piece that the fairy Han Yushu put here? Are you lucky right now, thinking that when you get to our Qinmu Academy Han Yushu will mediate for you? For example, Sovereign Han will instruct his daughter Han Yushu to pass the old Emperor Yu secretly, or to succeed the new Jun, find a reason to excuse you. Fortunately, the Academy can reduce your guilt. It is best to stay in Luojing with the body of sin, even if you lose your identity as a true protector of the country, and strive to retain the title of a master, use your private money, give up your own dowry and spend another 200 or 300 years of Taoism, and also have to run a few big weekdays so that you can make up for it? Do you want to say that you don't understand what I'm talking about? Let's say, what is your real name on the Wanyao sect's golden and jade genealogy? Don't treat our Qinmu Academy as a fool. I'm very busy and I don't have that spare time. I will accompany you to play some children's activities. I heard the boy in white, our Qinmu Academy, one by one. This Lu Bilong, until this moment she was really scared. Liang Shuang's realm is enough, and he is insightful to the ups and downs of Lu Bilong's mood, and he asks in his heart, did you guess it? Cui Dongshan smiled and replied, I don't dare to be greedy, it's my husband's guess. How could I think that this lady who used the identity of Lu Bilong would be so foolish and not confess? After hesitating, Cui Dongshan told this old man a bigger truth. Mr. Before and Han Yushu had a vicious fight on the Taiping mountain site, and Han Yushu did his best. Fulua and the formation are extremely accomplished, and he contacted Luojing in the Kingsapai formations and there was a guess. With Wan Yaezong's style of acting as a turtle, now that he has made up his mind to create the next sect, there will definitely be a like Lu Bilong, who will come out early to make arrangements. In short, on the husband's side this is a very simple context. Liang Shuang twisted his beard and smiled. It's a pity that fellow Qin Xiaodao is as careful as he is, and he is aware of his youth. It's a pity not to be a naive Taoist with the poor Dao. As for the battle between Qin Pingan and Han Yushu, Liang Shuang had heard it, not to mention Cui Dongshan's last sentence. I'm busy and I don't have any spare time, he said to himself deliberately. Cui Dongshan glanced at the young female crown with deep luck and great destiny. If there is a chance, he will dig the foot of the wall and pry to Shindu Mountain. Anyway, this Ma Xianhui is going to stay in Tongyi's Hao, and it is very likely that he will be left by Liang Shuang. In a certain Taoist temple in Liang State, it is not too much to be a famous guest in one's own sect. In fact, Ma Xianhui, the female crown, is said to be a direct biography but not strict. In fact, she is only a named disciple of Liang Guojing Liang Hao, but not the one who can really inherit Liang Shuang's mantle. For this reason, with his disciple Ma Xianhui, the relationship comes from the master and the apprentice, and the relationship is scattered to separate the pulse. Liang Shuang's line is only known from the top of the Haoran mountain. The famous incense is withered. The threshold for accepting disciples is really too high, and there is an ancestral instruction that cannot be violated. Ancient innocence, word of mouth, one word is one. This means that Liang Shuang's lineage has always been a single line with no disciples. In addition to this, there is a very hidden mystery in mystery. In fact, Liang Shuang has been looking for the reincarnated person of the preaching teacher for many years. To put it simply, since the first generation of patriarchs founded the mountain and established the Taoist tradition, in the long years after that, a long tradition that has been passed down for nearly 10,000 years is like there are only two masters and apprentices from beginning to end, but they only exchanged masters and disciples. Identity only. Suddenly remembered something, that ambitious Wan Yaozong Han Yushu, hasn't it been given to that by fellow Qin Xiaodao? The old man was free anyway, so he hung his hands in the sleeves of the Taoist robe and quickly deduced it. Unexpectedly, he quickly stretched out his sleeves and shook his wrists vigorously. Yo, it's hot. Although the calculus can't come up with a definite answer, Han Yushu is still undecided about his life or death, but in the eyes of the old man, it actually means that he has a firm truth. Thousands of years of living in the mountains but did not live on dogs. Liang Shuang smiled and said, he'll say hello to Xiao Zhao when I look back and help me let out the wind, saying that Han Yushu used to be alive and kicking, and was fortunate to have a discussion with the celestial teacher Liang Shuang. In this way, if someone else carefully calculates it, he has to pass the level of Liang Shuang first. Cui Dongshan deliberately turned a blind eye to this. As long as I didn't see anything, the husband would not owe this favor. Cui Dongshan just raised one hand and pointed in the air, so strange. The female cultivator of Wan Yao's genealogy under the pseudonym Lu Bilong was confused. She didn't know what the Confucian student of Tianmu Academy was doing. She guessed that the boy with a red mole on the eyebrows in front of her, listening to his tone, most likely was the one who just Wen Yu, the young deputy mountain leader who took office across continents. Liang Shuang glanced at it, but he knew what Cui Dongshan was playing. It was a form of Go, known for its many changes, so it was hailed as, the Great Oblique Change is hard to say. The national game at the foot of the mountain is waiting. The Yilan people on the mountain once highly admired this, but it was later rejected by Beidasheng Zheng Juzhong and Xiuhu Cui Huang. One of the color clouds, Zheng Juzhong's only mid-game disadvantage is extremely inferior. The big game started with a big diagonal. Cui Yang was only in the official stage and the game was a miss and finally lost half a goal. So much so that today's famous chess players almost no longer start with the big diagonal setting. Liang Shuang didn't think that Cui Dongshan was showing off. After all, a world chess player who could play such a game with Zheng Juzhong might be able to be complacent for a lifetime, but for the embroidered tiger who was dominant but fell short, it was an invisible shame. But why Cui Dongshan acted like this at the moment, the old true person is not interested in exploring. Some people do some things that outsiders can't understand how they think. The leader of the pulse is tantamount to giving up and being ranked among the 14th realms. Cui Dongshan asked abruptly, are you willing to leave Wan Yaozong? From then on, you have just been a LV Bilong with the Sanshan Fortune Land for no reason? The woman gave a sad smile. Sect Master Han Yushu is so ambitious, and governing a blessed land with an iron fist, how can he tolerate the betrayal of a monk from the Patriarch's Hall? She dared to do this, it would only lead to a dead end. So she has already made a decision. Since the identity is revealed, it will definitely involve Wan Yaozong being held accountable by the Confucian Temple, so Han Yushu is destined to be unable to help her get out of trouble, and will only try to separate her from her. So she can almost foresee her fate, go to Qianmu Academy, be interrogated, be questioned by the Academy mountain leader, detained, and maybe detained to go to the Gongda forest in the Middle-earth Shenzhou. Fortunately, she is still young and has the hope of entering the Jade Realm. The big deal is to retreat and practice, but she has changed a place from this Luojing Jitsue view. This is also one of the reasons why Han Yushu asked her to leave Sanshan Blessed Land early. I hope that within 100 or 200 years she will break the bottleneck of Yuaning in Tongyi's Hao, the Yu dynasty's Jitsue view. During this period, Han Yushu will not only teach 1 or 2 extremely superior Taoist secrets, will definitely secretly tilt a large amount of heavenly materials and divine money for her. At that time, LV Bilong can justifiably create the next sect, making Han Yushu sit on 3 sections. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, "At the Great Wall of Sword Chi or the Aquarius Island to the north, if you retreat like you will be killed. If you think that after the Academy knew about this, it just kept you locked up for 100 years, that would be too small to underestimate the power of the Confucian Temple's post-autumn accounts, especially you, such an insidious earth immortal, who has the greatest guilt, so listen to my advice. Before leaving Jitsue Temple, hurry up to worship a few more incense sticks and see if you can invite Daozu to bless you and intercede with the Confucian Temple personally. Otherwise you will be imprisoned to death, let alone enter the Yupu realm, even if you become what about the immortal? By the way, don't forget one thing. Now the head of Wuxia Academy is the thoroughbred of Luzhou Yufu Academy in Beiju. You know his temper, or else he will be the head of the mountain and he won't think behind closed doors in the Gongda Lin. Confucian Temple did not even dare to let him go to Qianmu Academy, just because he was afraid that he would live in Tonggizong every day and would not move away. Then Dafu, Qianmu and Wuxi, 3 mountain chiefs, would discuss together, and Zhou Shanshang heard about your great achievements. Do you think you can speak nice things for you? Take a 10,000 step back and say, even if Han Yushu loses his heart, he will protect you. Do you think Zhou Shanshang will spit on him? She was already the female crown of the bird of fright, and saw the white-clothed boy raise his hand, put his fingers together, his eyes were firm and he sweared, when you can swear to the sky, if am not at the head of the mountain and the school of the Qianmu Academy. On the side of Mr. Si Yi, if you don't take this matter down and don't shut you down to the gray hair, I will be named Lu together with you in the future. The old Jinren sighed, Jikugwen's tea is really good, not for free. The poor Dao also reminds the full moon fellow Taoist to say it. Before leaving Jikugwen, in addition to praying for incense, you can bring hundreds of books and be confined. After chatting to relieve boredom, then carry a mirror with you and be a companion, the beauty of the white-haired mirror prophet. The women's crown was so disrespectful, she turned her head suddenly, pinched the Taoist formula with both hands, and then sacrificed a secret treasure natal thing. It seemed to have used a mountain barrier technique, and then she trembled. The junior knows it is wrong. Tianshi Liang, help me. Liang Shuang laughed dumbly and shook his head. Taoist full moon, how can you go to the doctor in such a hurry? Poor Dao is not your life-saving straw, this one is. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, Han Yushu has set a sect prohibition on her. Once Han Yushu notices something wrong, even if it is separated by thousands of mountains and rivers, this full moon Taoist will still turn into a Taoist heart on the spot. An idiot in the mud. So close the door first and then ask Brother Liang for help, which shows that she is not stupid enough. The female crown looked terrified and began to sign up. My real name is Dragon Palace, a direct disciple of Wanyao ancestor Shirtang. My teacher has long passed away. Apart from me, there are only a few middle 5 monks with ordinary qualifications in this vein of ours. Now, the pill formation is an extravagant hope. Some people with good aptitude have long since switched to other veins. Cui Dongshan couldn't help but laugh. Dragon Palace? You actually took such a big name, dare you to be born as a human being in this life, you are born to do great things? Liang Shuang looked cold and disgusted Nguyen Yaozong and Han Yushu extremely. What kind of way to cultivate, what to ask for truth, what to become immortal? A good feng shui 3 mountain blessed land which has been tossed so smoky, that Taoist who is the true master of blessed land since it is so idle don't care? A battle like a sieve, sorted out the hearts of everyone in Tongyi's Hao. The sect master, the mountain master, and the head of the sect, the worship, and the anecdote. There are deviations and intrigues between the sects and the sects of the vassal. It is conceivable that these mountains and immortal masters, with others and the world, how can they be the same way? It's just like a fight, winning or losing 2 points. Cui Dongshan suddenly asked, which one is your first master of Wan Yezong's next sect? It can't be the daughter of Han Yushu, right? She said, I only learned about this not long ago. It is said that it was a nominally closed disciple of the previous sect master, who was accepted by Han Yushu as his apprentice. However, apart from Han Yushu, it seems that no one has ever seen this person with his own eyes. I only know that this person is young and has no aptitude for cultivating. He is the youngest golden pill in the history of Sanshan Fudi. This is because when this person successfully formed a pill, he once caused a great vision of heaven and earth. Even Zongman's formation was not completely covered up, and only then revealed some secrets. Up and down the sect all these years, no one dared to discuss this matter without authorization. Once discovered, they would be imprisoned by Master Xianglou himself in the back mountain water prison. The reason why I know is that Han Jiangshu secretly visited Jitsue Temple earlier. The sister-in-law of the sect master told me personally that her talented little uncle, the Taoist name Indus, is very likely to become one. A great monk in the Ascension realm. Speaking of this, she hesitated and said softly, I can see that Han Jiangshu and the monk are probably having an affair. Because Han Jiangshu was in the Taoist temple before, when he talked to himself about the young monk, Han Jiangshu thought he was hiding well, but in fact, his eyes were full of spring water. As soon as she said her words, she consciously lost her words. She shouldn't talk about these messy things in front of a great celestial master surnamed Longhushan and a deputy head of the Tianmu Academy. Unexpectedly, the white-clothed boy nodded and smiled. Very well, I love to listen to these. You might as well talk more about Wan Yaozong's salted fish insider. To tell the truth, you don't need to exaggerate. Holding both hands to stabilize Daoxin's crown, I can't hold it anymore. Liang Shuang stretched out a finger across a coffee table, pointed at the center of the female crown's eyebrows and said calmly, Ding. Suddenly the female crown was like a faint, pulling her head, she was like entering a sweet dream. Cui Dongshan smiled, stood up, squatted next to the women's crown, examined it for a moment, raised his palm, lightly patted the opponent's forehead, hitting the opponent's soul floating out of the body, then stood up, twisting his fingers around the clothes of the soul in the same coma, trembling, and then casually pushed the soul back into the skin of the body, leaving only the air house and the small world of the human body, like stars, hanging in the air. Cui Dongshan paced slowly, offering a golden sword light, and drew a sword chi thunder pool forbidden area. Cui Dongshan tilted his head from time to time or stood on tiptoe, carefully looked at the female crown's heart, and ended up in one place. Inside the mansion, a secret restriction carefully set up by Han Yushu was discovered. Cui Dongshan suddenly had 5 fingers like a hook. In an instant he pulled out a slender galaxy, composed of golden text. Almost at the same time the other hand was carving. A golden text that was almost the same came out, filling the gap in the heart for the women's crown. Cui Dongshan slapped the women's crown again and slapped the crown, solemnly reminding, Brother Liang didn't hesitate to spend a lot of effort to help you solve this huge hidden danger. What are you doing in a daze? Hurry up and thank the real person? The female crown with a slight pain on the cheek was unknown, so she quickly got up and retreated a few steps, and hit the old true man with a sect and said with gratitude, Thank you, the Heavenly Master, for your great kindness. From beginning to end, there was Ma Xianhui who was drinking tea in silence. She made up her mind that she must stay away from the white-clothed boy in the future, and it would be better if the two sides should not meet again. I want to come to this guy's husband, is it not much better? Otherwise can teach such a student? Cui Dongshan sat back to his original position. Dragon Palace, you can leave immediately, and go to Tianmu Academy to report the situation by yourself. Dragon Palace timidly asked, Will Shan Chang not walk with me? Cui Dongshan said with a dazed expression, Vice President one of Tianmu Academy? And not when you. Long Palace is like falling into the clouds, mistakenly thinking that he has heard it wrong, and smiled bitterly, when Shan Chang Mo is going to laugh. Cui Dongshan scowled and said, I am Dongshan. Liang Shuang asked, What is the deal with? Cui Dongshan rubbed his chin. Tianmu Academy has its own conclusions, but Dragon Palace is a surrender. If we talk more about Wan Yaozong and Han Yushu's pickled things according to the old rules of the Confucian Temple, we can slightly reduce the penalty and shut it down. Death is definitely not going to happen. If she is lucky, maybe she can go to the battlefield in the wild world to make up for it. As for the good or bad luck, it depends on when you of Tianmu Academy and the head of Wuxia Academy. What kind of attitude is Zhoumi? Anyway, I heard that Wenyu has a temperament not much better than Zhoumi, but Zhoumi is on the table. It is rumored that Wenyu is a person with extremely hard bones and careful thoughts. On the battlefield of Nan Pasuazhou, a fairyland demon clan who was in charge of the military tent died alive. If only based on military merits and regardless of seniority, when you can be directly as the head of the Tianmu Academy. Central Confucian Temple, Zhoumi of Yufu Academy was lifted from Gongdalan, and he was able to transfer to Tongjishao as the head of the academy. In the words of the chief Zhou, this called the Confucian Temple began to let dogs bite people. It is clear that the entire mountain top of Xianfu in the southern part of Tongjishao should be honest. After all, he was a scholar who had to be gifted by his husband to control anger before he took up his post as the mountain lord, and he was still a civil-style simple. Beiju Luzhou is looking for a college mountain leader who comes to visit and beats people himself, so that such a number one person came to the Wuxia Academy in Tongjishao to take charge of affairs, which in itself is a shock. In addition, the Confucian Temple also gave a kind reminder to Yu Quzong, who has made great achievements in the war. Don't do things too much and don't stretch your hands too long to the north. It's almost enough. In short, don't learn from the Tongye sect. Xuxianfu are all vassals. When you served as the deputy head of Tianmu Academy. Now, according to the ritual system of the Confucian Temple, the 72 Confucian Academy is equipped with one principal and 2 associates. Generally speaking, there are 2 deputy heads, one governs academics and is relatively empty. Responsible for the culture and education, general affairs, large and small can be managed, especially in the current awe-inspiring world. In the future, all the ritual books under the mountain must be from Academy. Wenyu is now the deputy head of the abbot for specific affairs. Wenyu can manage things on the mountain, and he has to take care of all the countries under the mountain within the jurisdiction of the Academy. Long Palace looked like a bereaved concubine, once again looking at the old man for help. How dare she go to the battlefield of the wild world to fight? Instead of being imprisoned by the Academy, she has seen the scene of the wild monsters flooding like a tide, and she has long been scared. The unmovable cities are like people lying on the ground waiting to die, eaten clean by the ant colony, and there is only a bone corpse in an instant. Cui Dongshan said, "This lady is uncertain, maybe she will have weak legs halfway and try to escape, so Lao Liang will her for a ride." Liang Shuang nodded and said, "Anyway, I'm going to meet the disciple who saw the real fire dragon. What a genius of cultivation." Zhang Shanfeng, a young Taoist priest who lay down on Difeng, was actually about to become the great celestial master of Longhu Mountain. If it weren't for the war, the celestial master's mansion would need a thug man that could be used, and Xiao Zhao didn't. He was willing to pull out the seedlings to encourage him, so he rejected the proposal of the real person of Fire Dragon to let his disciple replace the celestial master with a hereditary surname. Liang Shuang asked casually, "Then this Jitsue temple and the Yu court, would you like to give us an explanation?" Cui Dongshan said in an unpleasant way, "If it weren't for what I said, the prince would be a bit human. The majestic and mighty Mingjun would definitely not be counted and he wouldn't be fainted. Anyway, he would be the emperor of the Yu family. It's more than enough." Liang Shuang smiled, "This is not the style of embroidering tigers. Cui Dongshan is a little bit ill. I don't know if Brother Liang is boasting or cursing." Liang Shuang smiled and said, "Don't hide and tuck, why don't you let the poor Dao open your eyes?" Cui Dongshan stood up, shaking out a lifelike porcelain figure from his snowy white sleeves, who turned out to be exactly the figure of the Dragon Palace, just like carved out of a mold. Ma Xianhui looked and looked again. If it hadn't been for the 2 female national teachers to stand and sit one by one, otherwise he would really not be able to distinguish the true from the false. Cui Dongshan then took out the soul of a female ghost from his sleeve, raised his hand to vainly and said softly, "Go you." The soul clings to the closed porcelain figure. Cui Dongshan put his fingers together again and touched it. Living at the center of the porcelain person's eyebrows, like opening the face of a Buddha statue, is the finishing touch. After a while, the porcelain man opened his eyes and gave a blessing. It was a voice that was very similar to that of the Dragon Palace, and even the cold temperament was exactly the same. "Met the master." Cui Dongshan stretched out his hand and grabbed the whisk that the Dragon Palace had placed on the table. He held it in his hand and threw it to the Dragon Palace in front of him. The latter held the whisk in his hand and put it on one of his arms. The master gave a great treasure. Cui Dongshan squinted at the real Dragon Palace. "What do you want to do? Don't hurry to take off the true crown on your head and give it to our fellow full moon Taoist. As for the pair of green lotus and white lotus root shoes on your feet, and the piece on your body, the Taoist robe that shows the blindfold, I'll talk about it later." Liang Shuang said, "It's a pity, fortunately. It's a pity that the cost of these anti-sky methods is too high to be like that of armored weapons and Xinjia ferry boats. Fortunately, due to this bottleneck, the number of porcelains is limited and will not cause chaos in the world. The name is true. The person who cultivates the Taoism is no longer a person. But if there are such porcelains all over the world, the consequences will be disastrous. A careless one will repeat the same mistakes and turn the whole world into an ancient heavenly court 10,000 years ago. The Dragon Palace and his disciple Ma Xianhui on the side of the house were blindfolded by the female ghost. They mistakenly thought that the porcelain man himself had no intelligence. In fact, it was not. Xuanhuan could see through the layers of confusion. After the layers of confusion, that little real spirit flickered uncertainly. It's like a person's resuscitation and they will grow up quickly. In short, there are two masters in a house. In fact, the female ghost and the porcelain coexist spiritually. How will the two sides be in the future? Just look at Cui Dongshan's personal preferences. The ancient gods overlooked the world and regarded all the spiritual beings on the earth as ants. Ants are only worth looking down at the ground, and looking up at the sky is considered rampant? The previous human race was like this. What about these porcelains who now seem to be too fragile? Xuanhuan was in a solemn mood and said solemnly, "Fortunately, there are still people who can control you. Otherwise, I will be in charge of the Confucian temple and I will lock you to death." Cui Dongshan shook his shoulders and said triumphantly, "As long as there is a husband who dares to bully me?" Xuanhuan smiled and said. Cui Dongshan changed his name. He said, "Lao Liang, I think wait until Ma Xianhui settles the fate on Lianghua. You can come to Jiquiguan to practice the road with great concentration, and then he will continue to be the master." It's okay. The family doesn't talk about two things, but whenever there is something good, I will definitely stick to my family first. Xuanhuan frowned and said, "Is that Chen Pinggan's meaning?" Cui Dongshan slapped the coffee table and said angrily, "What do you mean by conscience?" Xuanhuan sneered, "Scare me?" Cui Dongshan took his sleeve and wiped the matcha table. "There are many things, the gentleman is reluctant to do it and he disdains it. Since it is just reluctance and disdain, it is not impossible." Xuanhuan asked curiously, "Qin Pinggan wants to learn from you Cui Yang, and use that knowledge to sow a continent of mountains and rivers?" Cui Dongshan shook his head and said, "Different techniques, Mr. is best at turning it into his own use and then come back and make a new look." For some reason, as soon as he heard the word Cui Yang, the Dragon Palace started to have a headache, and he covered his head with his hands. A master of cultivating Yuan Dixian was sweating like rain. Obviously, Cui Dongshan did remove her prohibition, but added a new landscape pass to the Dragon Palace. For example, if one of her thoughts involves a little bit of Cui Yang, or embroidered tiger, it is such a miserable end to the instability of Taoism. Wait to the Dragon Palace to finally stabilize Dao Xen, the white-clothed boy who she had guessed the identity, smiled and said, "Come with me, Cui Yang is a bastard, Cui Yang is a bastard." Poor Dragon Palace, this time she actually fell back to the ground in pain, her body curled up and she barely rolled all over the floor. Xuanhuan turned a blind eye to this and asked, "It's not 100 or 200 years, it won't happen, right?" He is so distracted, what should I do with his own practice? My husband has an estimate, before xianxia reopens the door, it will have a rudimentary shape. From the mountain to the mountain, from the heart to the human heart. And it will not delay Mr. S practice too much. So fast. Otherwise you think? Xuanhuan fell into silence, picked up the cupola, took a sip of tea and asked in his heart, "Yuan God, do you want it?" Cui Dongshan curled his lips, "You have nothing to hide from Lao Liang, you are going to Pushen Yunkatang to find a passing status, and there is still a mess that needs to be cleaned up." Xuanhuan asked again, "Then where is your Yangshin's body now?" Cui Dongshan blinked. "In the colorful world, just a few days ago I just found the place of cultivation in Baiyi. Anyway, it's empty. I can help take care of it." Xuanhuan quipped, "Is this going to create the next sect over there? Isn't it the same as the hero Han Yushu's opinion? As long as Cui Dongshan is on the side of xianxia, and another sect is created, the Luapa Mountain of Aquarius Island can be promoted from the upper sect to the authentic, and the Qingping Jinzong of Tonggishao can be promoted to the upper sect. In this matter, the plan with Wan Yaozong is about the same." Cui Dongshan stretched out his hand and clenched his fist, beat his heart lightly, raised his head and looked to the ceiling with a sad expression on his face. "When I thought that I was thinking of going with Han Xianren, I was so angry that my heart hurts." Ma Xianhui finally couldn't help it, and summoned the courage to whisper to the old real man, "Master, I don't want to come here to practice the Taoist temple." The old man nodded and smiled, "It's up to you. But you don't have to be afraid of this guy. The master and his husband are good friends at first sight. Only relying on this relationship this Chui Dongshan dare not take you. Xuanhuan of course knows a real embroidered tiger's chess skills. Like today's playing in the Dragon Palace, the previous encounters with Zhang Luzhu and Daiyuan at the Lantern Riddle Museum were just 2 dishes of wine and food. Chui Dongshan just casually shook his arms with a relatively side-by-side trick. It can be regarded as deceiving part of the chessboard, but it can't be called a real fairy hand. Xuanhuan finally asked the biggest doubt in his mind, why should you be so sincere when you be a student? In fact, the current old real person Xuanhuan, who is in the temple of Jitsue, is somewhat different from the celestial master Xuanhuan in the capital of Liangguijing, and is different from the ordinary monks who travel far away from the body. It means that the latter is higher and greater than the former. At this point the same goes for Chui Yang and Chui Dongshan. Chui Dongshan smiled calmly, a certain sentence is known to the same people. Why should the heavenly master ask more? Dragon Palace and Ma Xianhui are both Taoist women's crowns, so they don't understand the mystery of Chui Dongshan's words, because it involves a Buddhist Zen poem. Lonely cloud and wild crane he Tian does not fly. Xuanhuan shook his head and said, no. What you said is exactly the opposite. Chui Dongshan smiled and said, really the opposite? Why don't you think about it again? The reason changed another title, of course, was that she knew that she was cool in front of her, but she was just helping the real body to ask questions. Xuanhuan nodded, that's true. Chui Dongshan's elocutionary meaning is not esoteric, nor is it a mystery, it is nothing more than a simple truth. If you choose a limited freedom yourself, how can it not be a great freedom? Xuanhuan asked again, then the poor way can be understood as, you can actually choose a completely pure freedom at any time? Chui Dongshan asked, if you need to play chess with Chui Yang, Zheng Juzhong, Qi Jingchen, and Wu Shuang at the same time, how would you choose? Xuanhuan smiled and said, don't sit down, don't twist your child, don't play against each other. Chui Dongshan stretched out his hands, this is not enough. Xuanhuan squinted his eyes and asked, that's even more interesting. Now that you take charge of the people you are willing to take care of, who should take care of it? Chui Dongshan twitched the corners of his mouth. This old guy, he still doesn't forget about this matter and he has the same mentality as that of Zouzi. Xuanhuan did not give up on that answer and waited for the following. Chui Dongshan remained silent. This is very annoying. As a fairy with small arms and legs facing a great cultivator at the peak of the Ascension realm, he really can't stand up. Chui Dongshan missed that for the first time. Chui Dongshan sighed and slowly said, my husband said that doing interesting things is of course very interesting, but it may not be meaningful. But doing meaningful things must be interesting. Xuanhuan thought for a moment, this is a good reason. Chui Dongshan sighed and said, a certain sentence is known to the same people. Why should the heavenly master ask more? Xuanhuan sighed, and the mindfulness of his own body finally withdrew from ancient Heart Lake completely. You bother me, you deserve to be a fellow. Ma Xianhui glanced at the female national teacher of the Yu dynasty. Fortunately she couldn't understand it either. Chui Dongshan stretched out his palm to his mouth. Tianshi Liang, depending on the posture your Yin god wants to rebel, you must take care of him. Xuanhuan was too lazy to talk to this guy, stood up and said, Fall Moon Taoist, give you half an hour to clean up, poor Dao is waiting for you at the Jiaoyin ferry. Chui Dongshan suddenly shouted to Lao Jinren, Lao Liang, I have to ask for something for my husband. Xuanhuan wondered, what? Seeing that Chui Dongshan smiled thiefly, Xuanhuan began to make up for it. I said in advance, the poor road is a famous two-sleeved breeze, if it is a treasure of the town of the immortal soldier, there will be absolutely no such foreign objects, at most it's for your husband to borrow from Xiao Zhao, and it won't be returned for 300 to 500 years. It's not a big problem. Pan Dao, as the great celestial master of Longhushan, your celestial master can't just let people work without paying wages. Chui Dongshan rubbed his hands and said, Old God Liang is best at looking at qi, and he knows everything about the luck of the continent, mountains and rivers. Xuanhuan laughed and said, the cost-free gadgets make the poor Dao Bai worry about it, and let fellow Qin Xiao Dao wait for it. After the old Jinren took Ma Xianhui away from Jitsue Temple, Chui Dongshan glanced at the two Lu Bilong, fell back on the ground, resting his hands on the back of his head and lazily said, Hold tight, change your robes and cloud shoes. At the same time I will talk more about the inside story of the Yu family, temples and Shanshui officialdom. Just say what you have. Don't be afraid to say it tediously. If you can teach yourself some Wan Yaozong Taoist secrets, please hurry up. Teach him, stingy, no one has stinged his own truth. The Dragon Palace silently took off his boots, first put on an ordinary Taoist robe, and then grabbed a corner of the robe, and with a slight tug, he tore off a Feng Mao robe given by the sect and handed it to the one holding the whisk. Lu Bilong. The LV Bilong put on the robe, wore the pair of cloud shoes, threw the dust off, changed his arms to hold it and smiled and said, "Thanks to fellow Taoist Dragon Palace." Dragon Palace is extremely weird. Suddenly, hearing the man began to repeat the word Chui Yang again and again, Dragon Palace seemed to have received a dull fist in an instant, slumped to the ground, her face turned pale, and his robe was soaked with sweat. After Chui Dongshan stood up and sat on the steps outside, the Dragon Palace inside the house tremblingly told Lu Bilong about the secrets, and Chui Dongshan was also absent-minded. Suddenly with a boxing palm, I just thought of a sincere word from the bottom of my heart. I can talk to my husband when I look back. The sky is violent, my heart is vast, and thousands of mountains attract thousands of water, thunder thundering in silent places. Chui Dongshan supports his cheeks with both hands. I only talk about the Peach Leaf Alliance in Tonghishao. Among them are the Daquan Dynasty, Pushen Yunkatang and Xianxia. How is it now? As for the Golden Summit, the chief enshrines lying, and now I see my husband. What will happen? Ijo Sanshuiyuan Dafu Tianmu Wuxi. The long-term dragon boat in the mountain of Dafu Academy, and the wise Yang Pu. Wang Zai, deputy head of Wuxi Academy. Wen Yu, deputy head of Tianmu Academy. One continent north and south, the two largest sects, Yuguizang and Tonghizang. The Zhou chief of Yuguizang and Yunku Fudi, the master of Yuaning Jianxiu of Tonghizang. A little further away, the newly appointed king of Donghai Sea, the true dragon King Zhu. A little further away, Li Yeho, the lord of the South Sea. A deity makes a mountain, not its altitude. Water does not have to be deep. There is the Qingjing Mountain Green Tiger Palace and the Lord Lu Yong. There is also the old Qiu and Qiu Du. The ink line crosses the negative mountain fish, and the negative mountain. In the middle of the Wanlixiu River, Qingping Jianzong will build a private ferry. Let's talk about the future mountain dynasties of Tonghishao, the Yu dynasty that is about to usher in the new emperor at his feet, plus the Great Spring Yao, who is the most prosperous nation on the continent, and the Dayuan dynasty, which is the neighbor of Qingping Jianzong. Zhang Luzhu will soon go to the Dechong dynasty, where the young servant man is an aide. I just said that on the bank of the Rin River, someone has planned to establish the country, and the country's surname is Dugu. Mr. is also the chief guest officer of Taiping Mountain, and the anonymous guest officer of Liu's family in Aizhou, to sow the mountains and rivers of Tonghishao. First of all, it is the gathering of heaven and earth's aura so solid. For example, the monks from all walks of life searched the mountains, and killed the monks of the wild monster race on the spot. For example, near the engagement shop on the banks of the Jilin River, the old man Liang Shuang killed the ghost in the Yupu realm that was attached to Xuanhuan's soul. Furthermore, it is the death of the native monks in Tonghishao, the interpretation of soldiers all the way in the aura, all returned to the world. Generally Xinfu, especially Zongzi sect, have secret methods that can retain that essence of Dao Qi. In addition, the various countries under the mountain, the fairy mansion on the mountain, extensive repairs and the creation of the Xinjia ferry, can also win over the world in the aura, and it will not disperse. The site of Qingping Sword Sect was chosen because of this. Chui Dongshan did not destroy the plan of Jindingwans guarding the mountain. A Jade Pu realm master with a combat power equivalent to an immortal has little influence, but the Big Dipper array in the Golden Summit view can bring an immeasurable aura to the northern part of Tonghishao. Second, Dragon Qi. Countries have restored their country one after another. The more powerful a dynasty is, the more abundant the dragon will be. This is extremely valuable because it belongs to being out of nothing, and does not need to rely on any physical objects with the world. 3. The cultural and martial destiny of Wenwu temples across the continent, among which mountain destiny, such as the reappointment of the 5 mountains of Zen by emperors and monarchs. And that prefix in all kinds of Xinfu sects will definitely pour a lot of money into the gods, jianghu. For incense. Large and small city temples including the capital, prefectures, counties and counties. The imperial court enshrined a large number of gods and gods of mountains and waters, or were promoted to the imperial temples in various places, and were included in the imperial golden jade genealogy, or the civil and military heroes made up for the lack of positions. 5th, the stale air of the ancient battlefield is cleared, and the territories that have been reduced to ghost cities, turn the suffocating and filthy air into the air of pure spirits. It can be through the land and water ceremonies and the Zhoutian Dajiao, to help extradite the dead. 6. In the end, the most illusory and most important thing is to sow people's hearts. And these are my husband's. Not long after deciding on the location of the next clan in Tongi's he has already thought clearly. A line of light or dark lines, the names, realms, hometowns and backgrounds of more than 300 characters in Tongi's as well as the more than 2,000 people who have extended all the way from them, are all remembered by the husband. People and things, people are nodes and things are lines, and in the end it is like forming a large crisscross web together. Today the old real person Liang Shuang, who is a guest of Jiquiguan, what he sees and even what he thinks of, is destined to be just a corner of the Tongi's heart-to-heart world of his husband. Besides, this is only limited to Tongi's Beipingzu Beiju Luzhou. How about the whole world? Not to mention Beiju Luzhou, only the Dragon Elephant Sword sect in Nanpasuazhou, the brand new Yulong sect that has left the Green Mountains without worrying about firewood, the Jiozhen Immortal Pavilion in Zhongtu Shenzhou, Xiaolongqiu Delankyu Yupanshui's Mystic Dynasty, Qingshinshan Baiwafuti, Miyunxia's family, Judu Mountain where Deng Liang is located. And the stewards of the transcontinental ferry that used to go to the Suspension Mountain frequently. And the sects of the continents behind them. And if there is no accident, there are already a small group of sword repairs from all continents. Under the invitation of the husband at the expense of incense, he secretly went to Fuyao Island. The husband must not let the monks who are greedy for mineral veins, they are already ruined enough. The mountains and rivers of Fuyazhou continued to worsen, and it was okay to earn money by their own ability, but if the heroes from all walks of life fight against it, and they will not hesitate to break the ground, then they will have to ask the sword immortal to answer. If the old scholar knew that his husband had done so much, and in the future, Jiazi would only do more. Old talents still have to pull their beards or feel distressed. But my husband, at best, he will only let the old scholars hear a little bit of news. This is how Mr. gave his husband such a student. As the last hidden official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, he stayed on the side of the city, and eventually became the last sword repairman to leave the wall of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. Becoming a disciple of Wensheng's lineage, he must fill up the vacancies in the mountains and rivers where Mr. Hedao Sanzhou is located, and spare no effort regardless of the cost. Cui Dongshan stood up and let out a long breath. Hundreds of rivers flow. Tianren chooses a man. In the ghost city of the Great Yuan dynasty, there are more than a dozen wild Xiao and Wufu who came here just to beg for money. It is estimated that no one would have thought that they would become a hard-working coolie. What they do every day is to gather the remnants of the city. The corpses have opened up a lot of cessation places similar to the Yizhuang, and they must try to identify the identities of the bones. Then they can help to bury them. Then they will set up the stone and write the names of their hometowns. So this requires them to bite the bullet. When the subordinates of the household were looking for books and checking the archives, these wild Xiao and Wufu, it is estimated that they have never touched so many books in their lives, and then they will be recorded in a ruined city temple by the young man named Guqiu. One by one in the ruins of the ruins where the wind gusts and the lights are miserable. These guys are just asking for money. They also have to serve as ghost messengers. They have to interrogate the ghosts every night and check their identity. The scholar surnamed Zhong, the fat man next to him, who called himself Gusu and surnamed Yu, walked around the beautiful woman every day, calling her sister on his lips, but he called himself elder brother Yu. And the boss, the brawny man in armor who can't leave the sword, is a 5-level martial artist. He and the woman who was born in Shanzai met halfway through, and they were considered to be a wild mandarin duck in a dewy marriage. The beautiful woman's name is Wang Manming. She is not tall, she is small and exquisite, and she hides her ugliness. What's more, she has a beautiful face, and she also likes to wear a short nightgown with a waist, and a pair of embroidered shoes on her feet when she walks. Will also twist the waist deliberately, as if to be blown to the ground by a gust of wind at any time. Every time she saw the fat man named Yu, she had to endure the nausea, guilt and frustration. Fortunately, there are 3 hours before and after noon every day, and you can continue to search for gold and silver treasures and antique treasures, but all their gains in this city will still be recorded by the weird Guqiu. They are divided into categories and roughly estimated. A price because according to their agreement with the scholar surnamed Zhong, 10% of the profit can only be drawn 10%. At the beginning, of course, everyone was unwilling. There is no such business in the world. In private, when the total is total, it will be evil to the courage. Taking advantage of the unpredictable Qingshan swordsman, he is temporarily absent. In the city, I had to deal with the surname Zhong, and deliberately left the ancient hill behind in a dark wind and night, and wanted to slaughter the shabby scholar in partnership. As a result, A fat man carried all of them and hanged them all. I got up and screamed. Only the beautiful woman, who was called the sister by the fat man, said something sadly. Sister, you are confused. She escaped a catastrophe. Although she was also hung up, her head was upside down, but she was not beaten. After that night, everyone accepted their fate. In the night of this day, the ghosts in the Jiuzhou city god temple have already withdrawn, sitting on the ancient hill after the city god's big case in the past, gently putting down the pen and looking up at the ghost sitting on the threshold of the lobby. Asked softly, Mr. Zhong, why don't you tell them directly? You force them to do this every day so that you can live and make money, and you can also accumulate good fortune for them. Zhong Kuei turned his back to the ancient Qiu, who is also a ghost, and said, this involves being kind and unwilling to be evil. You can think about the knowledge here. If you want to be thorough one day, you may be able to sit still. The location of the city can be turned into a merit book. This ancient hill was the son of an official from the weaving bureau of the Great Yuan dynasty. He was born as a scholar in the two lists. He was a county lieutenant in a county near the state town. It was just a weak scholar who hacked and killed with a knife. What can he block? What can I protect? I was torn alive by the monster monk who took the lead to break into the county office. His death was painful and miserable. However, after suffering this disaster, he did not become a ghost after death, but always maintained a little spiritual light. Lonely and wild ghost, wandering here, and even became the master of this ghost city step by step, and also accepted the shame girl from the Peachtree Courtyard as a ghost, because he didn't like a new Great Abyss dynasty to stand on his own. Guy do things sloppily, indiscriminately, without asking the identity of the deceased, gather the bones casually, and they are very fragmented during the transportation. Gu Qiu once tried to visit the military account at night, and discussed with the general in charge of the water and land law. In the end, he was directly regarded as a murderous ghost, and he ignored Gu Qiu's repeated explanations while avoiding the monk's attack. Maybe he was regarded as a military merit. Gu Qiu was disheartened. The ghost girl, carrying 2 pots of old wine buried for many years, came to the Qinhuang temple and handed a pot of wine to Zhong Kuei. Zhong Kuei got up and took the hip flask and said with a serious face, Xiao Fang, don't change your mind. I like brother Zhong. The girl ghost named Xiaofeng smiled, no way. Zhong Kuei was a little bit lost. I like it secretly, it's not a big problem. The girl shook her head and smiled, no way. Zhong Kuei sighed, sat back on the threshold, lifted the mud seal, sniffed and complained to himself, I am all to blame for my awe-inspiring righteousness, and how much peach blossom luck has been dispelled. Gu Qiu was a little helpless. This Mr. Zhong is good at everything, but on this matter he is a bit confused. After drinking, Zhong Kuei paced back to his temporary residence. The fat man didn't know where he was going to fool around. He was worried that you would be fooling the moth, so Zhong Kuei raised his palm, looked at the mountains and rivers, looking for the fat man's traces, but quickly removed the spell and shook his head helplessly. The ruins of a xianxia inn in the city, the atmosphere is warm, and at the end of winter, there are lush flowers and trees on a green meadow. Pieces of clothes are scattered on the ground. A plump, snow-white carcass with hands spread out and grass seeps from between the fingers. The woman raised her head high, sobbing like a whistle and having a tired nose. It was obvious that she had been bullied miserably. Looking at the fat man lying on the wall side. In a war of intestines, it was hard to beat the drums and retreat, amidst the male roaring and crying, and it was agreed to fight again in the coming day. The key sister clearly saw the fat man on the other side of the wall during the period, but she still smiled charmingly and raised her brow. Looking at the fat man almost couldn't hold back, he went to help the driver, yelled and quickly let go of the sister. The thief was going to be fierce. Anxiously returned to Zhong Kuei's side, the fat man sat paralyzed on Bowtie's side and said with a smile, a good match will meet Liang Kai. There was a brazier in the corridor. Zhong Kuei was reading and didn't say anything. The 2 neighboring high-ranking official residences in the state city seemed to be stunned by the 2 neighbors. One library is called the 7,000-volume library, and there is an 8,000-volume library next door. Yu raised Erlang's legs, put his hands on the railing and asked, Brother Zhong, the ghosts in the city who were detained by Gu Qiu in the county town, since they can't be saved, how about? There is no adversity on Xuanhuan Road. Yangjian kills people and underworld ghosts eat ghosts. Zhong Kuei shook his head and said, don't think about it. Once the fat man used it as a fruit for his belly, those ghosts would be destined to have no future life. Yu wailed and said with a sad face, then when will I recover my state? Zhong Kuei, think about it, if there is an ascendant servant by my side, how beautiful is it when I go out? Xuanhuan just lowered his head to flip through the book and said casually, "It is the same agreement. If you dare to eat any wandering ghost without authorization, I will let you fall immediately." Eugene stomped his feet with anger, but this kind of grievance is just accustomed to it. Thinking of the charming picture that he saw just now, the fat man wiped his mouth and tentatively asked, "This kind of human relationship pleasure as long as I don't force it? Both of you love me, you will never stop me, will you?" Xuanhuan nodded and said, "As long as the two sides are willing, do whatever you want. But if I find out that you have performed some secret methods on women, the old rules, you will fall for a moment." Eugene laughed and said, "Well, just by the appearance of widows, this attitude, and the things that go hand in hand, there are a few women in the world that can withstand the charm of an old man like me." Xuanhuan raised his head and glanced at the fat man when he turned the pages of the book and said in a bad mood, "You are a dignified ghost, do you want to nod? The ancients sincerely don't deceive me. Crescent is the blade of grace, killing all the romantic people in the world. The fat man only feels the aftertaste is endless. I just wish I could throw my face on the ground and let that sister be a bedding under her body. Alas, when my sister got up, her back was red. I feel so distressed that I can't wait to help rub it." The fat man stretched out 2 fingers, gently twisted his face, and with a slight tug, he tore off the entire face, revealing a face without any flesh and blood, and shook that face casually. "My thing, it can be used as an armrest for a woman, a stove, clothes, boots, and powder. The magical effects are endless." Xuanhuan turned a blind eye to this, just smiled and said, "Be careful of your wealth." The fat man heard Xuanhuan's words at once, and quickly covered his face again and said in a trembled, "Can't it?" Xuanhuan said, "No guarantee." The fat man beat his chest vigorously and said with grief, "This kind of frenzied idiots can't be done by ghosts. Is it human?" The power of the hand movement is not small, and the fat is trembling like a piece of pork belly falling on the cutting board, swaying. The fat man suddenly jumped up, his face was pale with anger and wailed, "I was so angry that I almost died on the spot." Xuanhuan turned a deaf ear. The fat man squatted at Xuanhuan's feet, smiling flatteringly, "Brother Xiong must help me." Seeing that Xuanhuan was just reading, the fat man immediately changed his words. "Big brother Xiong." Crashed his neck, glanced at the contents of the book pages, the fat man exclaimed, "Big brother Xiong is really elegant. With the style of the ancients, he chews plum blossoms and reads ancient poems, and reads the banned books on a snowy night and warms the wine." Xuanhuan just looked at the academic casebook, which was once listed as a banned book title by Yuan's Yuan family, but the owner of the old bookstore was bold enough to privately hide one of the earliest printed editions. Eugene whispered, "Xuanhuan, tell me the truth, what realm is that xiaoma?" Xuanhuan said, "I don't know what the specific realm is. I only know that Mr. Xiaomo, as long as he is willing, you can hack to death." Eugene sat on the ground and sat cross-legged. Seeing that the brazier was slightly dimmed, he hurriedly reached out to fiddle with the charcoal fire. Isn't this worrying that his brother Zhong's feet are cold and his mouth was chattering? "In fact, I saw Mr. Xiaoma for the first time. I feel kind, and when I come back to attend the celebration, I must have a few more conversations with Mr. Xiaomo. Anyway, everyone is a world-renowned person, and they are all obedience to others. Both parties must have a chat. To tell the truth, I'm still luckier than Mr. Xiaomo. Scholars like Brother Zhong are the only ones resolute, dull, and benevolent. They are all righteous and naturally not angry and prestigious. Even the hidden officer is better than no one. Come on, I dare to say such things in front of the hermit." Xuanhuan glanced at the flattery and smiled. No wonder someone who can be an emperor can indeed bend and stretch. The husband is holding a white blade and cut down 1,000,000 heads. The fat man sighed and rubbed his cheeks with his hands. Xuanhuan asked, "Have you ever seen that swordsman Pei Min?" "Unfamiliar, I haven't talked a word. Back then, Pei Min traveled across the sea and passed by my pitiful little grass nest. I just met one side from a distance and didn't dare to say hello. Ascension Realm sword repair, I can't provoke me." Xuanhuan asked again, "Where is Zhou Zi?" "I have seen it." Eugene slowly said, "I have seen each of them once before and after my death. When I was a squanderer in the capital, I saw a roadside fortune-telling booth, which was set up by Zhou Zi. Besides saying that I was in a disaster, I also said a few strange things. Of course, it turned out to be some plausible language. I definitely didn't believe it at first. Later, I was slapped in the street and didn't dare to fight back. Later, the ruling and the opposition began to circulate a ballad. The general meaning is more subtle. The twists and turns anyway are roundabouts saying that I have a fate. His Majesty is very suspicious. He scratched and hacked and made a mess, and in the end only my family was left. Seriously, yes, I want to rebel? The things I never dreamed of were actually forced by the Emperor. I can't crane my neck and make people cut off my head. That's the opposite. But I also saw Zhou for the second time. I knew the origin of those ballots. I didn't care if there were some or not. I just asked Zhou about it. If there was a destiny, if there weren't those ballads, I was a dude who only knew about eating and waiting to die. How to be an emperor, what you Zhou did, what is it? Do you act on behalf of the sky? Do you follow the times and help the flames? Or, man will conquer the sky. Zhong closed the book and said, Zhou talks to the sky, observes the yin and yang news in depth and makes strange changes. His words are big and non-existent, and he must first examine the small things, push the big ones as far as the limitless. The fat man stretched out his hand to warm himself, stared at the charcoal light, nodded and said, This is what I saw in the book when I was 6 years old. It's the gentleman of Qin Pingan, Wei Wenxing said. Zhong smiled and said, A person who remembers these things at the age of 6 will really only eat and wait for death for the rest of his life? Believe it or not. The fat man shook his head, feeling wronged. I don't think about it anymore, it's just fine now with your Zhong side falling back to falling back to falling back, it's better. Speaking of this, the fat man was silent for a moment, then began to beat his chest again and wailing, Thinking about it, it's not good compared to before. Zhong lightly patted the cover of the book, turned his head and looked at the sky for a round of moon, and muttered to himself, Speech is a strange thing. It is piled up word by word, sentence by sentence. Note 1, but it's like making a snowman next to the brazier. There are clouds in the Buddhist scriptures, and those who use their minds well will not grow ignorant grasses in their hearts, and flowers of wisdom will often bloom everywhere. Since we have acquired the human body and heard the Dharma, we must work hard to practice and do not spend time. The fat man raised his head, looking at Zhong expression in his eyes, lowered his head again and continued to fiddle with the charcoal fire. Zhong patted the fat man on the shoulder and chuckled softly, Eugene, we are good ghosts, but don't out of your heart. The fat man raised his head again, grinned and said, I know if you see ghosts as you see people, you can see people as Buddha, so you know your mind and nature, that is, your heart is a Buddha. Zhong stared, I understand the truth. After a moment of silence and pairs, Zhong said, I can help you recover 50% of your family's wealth. The fat man hugged Zhong thigh, My dear father. As a result, Zhong held his head in disgust and moved away. The fat man raised his hand to wipe tears. Zhong really, you are more than enough to be the first assistant to the widow, leading the civil and military officials, more than enough. If the widow had your assistant back then, let alone a continent of mountains and rivers in your pocket, even Jianghu next door will be taken down by the widow. Similar to this kind of bullshit, you can hear it, but Zhong is just a little strange and asked, I'm just so happy to ask you to get back 50%? Are you a ghost? In terms of the degree of financial fanatics, this fat man is comparable to Qin Pingan or even worse. After all, Qin Pingan just likes to make money, and he is a must for spending money generously. But this fat guy is outrageously searching. Eugene gave an unexpectedly weird answer, be nice to some fools. Zhong smiled and asked, Why do you say this? You smiled and said, Intuition. Tinmu Academy. In the small study room, a gentleman of the academy is looking through a secret file of the academy. It is the sect that Xiandushan will soon establish, named Qingping Jianzong, which is the next sect of Beipingzi Luapa Mountain. Chui Dongshan the first suzerain. In addition, the autumn planting comes from the lotus roots of Tonggishao. As for the next Zhonglu Chui Wei and the chief worshipper Miyu, they are both local sword repairers of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Except for these few who must be recorded, the remaining members of the next case do not need to report to the academy. He stood up and said with a smile, Rare. The visitor at the gate is the deputy head of Wuxia Academy, the gentleman Wang Zai. Although when you and Wang Zai are close friends who have similar personalities and are now the deputy head of the academy, in fact, after so many years have passed since Wang Zai returned to his hometown from the Great Wall of Jianqi, they only met today for the second time. Wang Zai looked at the crowded study, sure enough it's still the same. In addition to books, there are books in the study room. The bookshelves are already full and there are small mountains of books on the ground. It's just that, at the foot of the mountain, there is a wooden board. Hang a plaque with the words, Don't wake up alone. There is also a copybook framed and hung on the wall, which is an excerpt from a word. My house is small, outside the shadow of dragons and snakes, in the sound of wind and rain, is the real thing. This is only when reading place in his spare time, not a place to deal with college affairs. Normally when you would not be here to entertain guests. Fortunately, there is finally an extra chair in the study, but there is also a large stack of books. You didn't have the awareness of hospitality. Wang Zai had to do it himself. After removing the little book mountain, sitting on a chair, the dusty deputy mountain leader exhaled, "This road is easy to walk and I am exhausted." When you knows why Wang Zai did not take the ferry. Although Wuxia Academy is on the south side of a continent, many things the boundary is not obvious, and the Confucian Academy is not the top of the fairy family, so there is no suspicion of grabbing territory. When you ridiculed, Brother Mingqi, the previous Confucian temple discussion was a big show, and I am envious of it. Wang Zai, the word Mingqi. Wang Zai smiled and said, "If it's you, I wouldn't dare to go to the shop to drink." In the Great Wall of Jianghu, Wang Zai actually often went to the Summer Palace, but at that time the hidden officer was still Xiao Sun. In addition to the two sword immortals, Luoshan and Xuan, he often saw Pang Yuanji. Because Wang Zai has not only been to the Great Wall of Jianghu, but also coincided with the meeting, he has also become the only scholar in the academy who has left a card for nothing. The pros and cons are both positive and negative, except for one sentence. Be generous with others, be strict with yourself, persuade others with reason, restrain yourself with morality. The world is peaceful, there is really nothing wrong. There is also a line in small letters temporarily added after Wang Zai, being benevolence is for oneself, one is benevolent, and benevolence is for oneself. I hope that those who have this heart will have no sorrow in everything. It's not how well Wang Zai wrote, but in the eyes of Shuigong Academy and Haoren Zongmen, the existence of Wang Zai's innocent card is too special. Is an isolated case. Two adjacent innocent cards Wang Zai remembered clearly. One of them is the words from the bottom of the heart of a sword immortal Jin Jiazhou, "Never deceive the second treasurer, the wine is unparalleled by Chen Pinggan." The other piece, "When Sheng is in the same line, not shallow and has a thicker skin. The second shopkeeper will come to Lu Xiaozhou in the future. Please drink a real good wine." It is estimated that this person was in the same situation as Wang Zai at the time, and he was a Haoren sword repairman who would leave the Great Wall of Jianghu and return to his hometown soon. Wang Zai was a little startled, his face was sad, and when you didn't bother him. When Wang Zai recovered, he smiled again. In fact, Wang Zai, the only talented person, wanted to say something. "Did you think that those innocent cards were written for outsiders? It's all those sword repairers talking to themselves." Are all last words. It was just the words that came to his lips, and Wang Zai still swallowed his stomach. Even if Wen Yu is the best friend, Wang Zai is reluctant to talk about it, but just smiled and said, "You don't know, I wrote the innocence card cheeky at the time, how much ridicule I received. Someone at the liquor store called me it's the sage of Qinglu and Lord Gentleman. They also asked me on the spot if I was poisoned in the wine. Some people advised me not to cheat the second shopkeeper. They said that the second shopkeeper's character is no longer good, and this kind of thing is still impossible to do. Of course, it was mistaken for Chen Pinggan's wine holder. These are nothing. Do you know the most uncomfortable sentence? What is it?" Wang Zai laughed at himself. "There is an old Jianxiu squatting on the side of the road in the Yuaning state. He shook his wine bowl and said to me, mostly a scholar with a little conscience left." The complicated mood that was just suppressed, Wang Zai felt a little heavy because of his own words. Our college, from beginning to end, is outsiders. Has never even been regarded as an ally by Jianqi Great Wall. There are only two scholars, which is an exception. So there is the saying, a liang from a distance, but a hidden official from a closer look. Is cursing? Yes and not. I don't really think of myself as a person. How arrogant and conceited is the sword repair of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, how arrogant and reasonable. Will waste saliva swearing? They will not talk nonsense with Brother Haoren at all, just ask the sword. When you just listen quietly to the words of his friends. Wang Zai saw the very familiar bamboo tube on the table and was about to grab it. When you quickly reached out to hold the bamboo tube and warned, "Don't disturb the afternoon nap." It turns out that inside this green bamboo tube, there is an extremely rare black monkey just as big as a fist. It can really study ink for the master, and it naturally prefers to feed on ink, so there is no need to clean the ink stone. The last Confucian sage to sit on the Great Wall of Sword Qi was named Yi Laolian. He and Wen Yu are both teachers and friends, but they are not strictly disciples. The ink monkey in the bamboo tube, and the original copybook on the wall, were gifted to Wen Yu by Yi Laolian before leaving Haoren World. Wang Zai casually picked up a book next to him, shook his head and said, Don't bend the corners when I have told you how many times novel. Calm. When you smiled and joked, I read the book for myself. What kind of seal is a collection stamp, and what kind of children and grandchildren Sun Yongbao use? I don't have the sourness of a family like you. Only talk about the origin of the two, it is indeed a difference between the two. But the two classmates never shy away from talking about this. Wang Zai turned to a page, picked up the book, pointed to the seal above, and when he looked at the handwriting he knew that it was Wen Yu who had engraved the book seal himself. What is this? The 8-character base. There are roads in the mountains and books, and the sea is high in the sky. Wen Yu glanced around and smiled. I didn't say that I don't have a personal seal. I just said that on my own side I don't want to use my sons and grandchildren Yongbao. Far inferior to the daily behavior of the elders. Wang Zai asked, where shall I give you the seal? Wen Yu smiled and said, I'm not here, I'm lying on the desk where I'm dealing with official duties. Anyway, brother Minky's cheeky help me begged for me, how can I be negligent? Before leaving the Great Wall of Jianqi, Wang Zai once asked for a seal with Chen Pingyuan for a classmate friend. Because one of the seals of the 100 Swords Immortal Book of the 100 Swords compiled by Chen Pingyuan, the base of the seal is, the day resembles the rain and the moon resembles the night. It happened that Wang Zai's friend had the word Yu in his name. And this person is Wen Yu, who is sitting opposite Wang Zai at this moment. Because Wang Zai took the initiative to speak and asked if he could add the content, Chen Pingyuan made a special trip to add side stamps and signatures to the seal that year. In fact, the seal of the square seal was too literal, and I had eaten ashes in Yenzhua's silk and satin shop for many days, so Chen Pingyuan, which was a trivial matter to say hello to Fatty Yen, was sent to the wine shop. It's just that Xiao Sun hadn't betrayed the Great Wall of Jianqi at that time, and Chen Pingyuan was not a hermit, and his signature was simply Chen Pingyuan. Although it is just a favor, it is very likely that he will never meet that Wen Yu for the rest of his life. But either he didn't agree. As long as he agreed, Chen Pingyuan didn't have the slightest perfunctory matter. The content of the side paragraph was engraved with more than 800 words of scripture in extremely small, tiny, small letters. Only the two imprints of Bai Jiangxian and Jianxian, neither of which recorded the content of the side paragraph. That's good, otherwise Wen Yu will panic. After all, unlike his friend Wang Zai, he has never been to the Great Wall of Jianqi. Wang Zai put back the book, took out a seal from his sleeve, gently placed it on the table and smiled. I gave it to you for reluctance. It can barely be regarded as a gift. Is the 300 frost falling orange persimmons, at the place where Na Yi Laolian once looked through the imprint. When you thanked him, I was too poor in my pocket, but I didn't respond. Wang Zai waved his hand and sighed. Now the entire Tongyi's How is the fish on the cutting board. There are dragons everywhere, and one day the snake will be unbearable, and there will be continuous disputes over and under. Then take advantage of that day and set up the rules early. Wen Yu said indifferently, the truth of the academy does not need to be repeated repeatedly. It is enough to say it once. Wang Zai smiled and said, you should go to our Wuxia Academy as the deputy head of the mountain. Wen Yu shook his head and said, you are more suitable for Wuxia Academy, just as I am more suitable for staying in Tianmu Academy. Wang Zai wanted to say something but stopped. Knew that this guy would never give gifts for nothing. Wen Yu helplessly said, okay, within the rules I will definitely help as long as I can. Besides, in the future, whoever will help will have to say two things. Wang Zai laughed and said, I am a person who is more affectionate and righteous than someone. I can't help on the face of it, but I also look for opportunities to help a group secretly. Wen Yu bluntly said, neither I have met Chen Pingyuan, so why talk about love? Wang Zai threatened, Wen Yu, the ugly words are at the forefront. If you, the deputy head of Tianmu Academy, are not at all humane, then the relationship between the two of us will be weakened. Wen Yu said with a stern face, gentlemen's friends are as pale as water. Why would Wang Zai not know this friend and pretend to himself? Wen Yu asked, you already know what happened to Xiao Longqiu, right? Wang Zai nodded and said, it is the Academy residence newspaper I got on the road when I came here. Wen Yu smiled and said, if he doesn't make a move, he'll talk to the dragon immortal monarch. I have to say that this hand draw is indeed extremely beautiful and very pleasing. Wang Zai got up and said, I have something to ask. I need to find Changfan Shanchang. Wen Yu waved his hand and said, remember, don't go hand in hand. Being a book thief is nothing more than reading a book. Wang Zai smiled and left, with his hands folded to show his innocence, and then walked out of the study along the rugged mountain road. When he reached the door, Wen Yu craned his neck and suddenly shouted angrily, "Wang Zai!" Wang Zai had to go back the same way, put a book back to its original position. Wen Yu stood up directly, stared. "There are 2 more. Wang Zai took out 2 books from his sleeve and said with a smile, "They are all the deputy heads of the college, so stingy." Wen Yuqi smiled and said, "I'm at the Jianghu Great Wall instead, and it doesn't cost money to keep drinking." "It's impossible." Wang Zai leaned at the door and said, "But if you go to the Great Wall of Jianghu, you might be the 3rd treasurer of the liquor store." Wen Yu was non-committal and curiously asked, "You are so familiar, so Chen Pingan didn't give you a personal seal?" Wang Zai smiled and said, "Guess. Leave in big strides." Looking up at the sky, the sun is shining brightly, and a scholar who thinks he has not done anything in the Great Wall of Jianghu said loudly, "The road is muddy, people are frustrated, heroes and thieves do not contain books. The real celebrities are not romantic," and Dashi Lei falls into the sky. It turned out to be a gentleman. Moxiandu, the shopkeeper's name is U-Mountain, and the road number is also Mountain. At the door of his shop, the young and handsome Yuing Mountain, fishing in the river and playing luminous shade. The storm is set in the evening with 2 new moons going up and down. I saw a young female crown with a sword back. She was really beautiful. I only felt that the woman I liked most would be ranked 2nd from tonight. Unexpectedly, when the female crown approached, she said straightforwardly, "My name is Huang Ting. I heard that you are willing to go to Taiping Mountain to practice?" There was a guest wearing a hat and drape, and he did say such a thing. Just waited until Huang Ting came to the front. U-Mountain became a little shy. Seeing that he hesitated, Huang Ting felt a little embarrassed, so he said, "Don't force it." She pressed her words and asked Yu Jin to leave. Yu Angshan quickly lost her fishing rod and said decisively, "Go." "Why not go?" Huang Ting stood in place. In Mountain he had to stop and was puzzled. Is this to explain some Shantao Gate rules? Huang Ting pointed to the shop with the open door. "No matter what?" Waving a big hand at Mountain, "All are foreign objects." Huang Ting sighed. How did he feel that he had found an uncle who would only spend money but not make money? Lost on the mountain. Although Cui Dongshan has settled with a certain painting sage in China, Zhu Lian has nothing to do anyway, so he holds a brush in each hand, opens the bow on the left and right, and draws the pen at the same time, and is painting a picture of a figure. It is meticulously traced with meticulous brushwork, and the characters in the painting are very detailed. Qingshan backsword. Especially a pair of eyes, extremely expressive. Zhu Lian smiled and said, "Is it okay?" A little lotus man who was lying next to the painting table, nodded vigorously, probably because he felt that he was not sincere enough, sat up and clapped vigorously. In the lotus-blessed land, the fox country, Peixiang found the water dragon. Peixiang frowned slightly with a sad expression on his face. "This time the next celebration we were not invited. Did the mountain master have some opinions? Take the opportunity to hit us? Establishing the next clan, what a big thing." Shi and Hongxia, although their realm is not high, they are somehow members of Shangzongzheshitang. Hang's thoughts are not as much as the master of the fox country, and he whispered, "It must be the owner of the mountain that has his own consideration. A mirror flower on the Tonggishao mountain. Where did Jiang Thief go to touch chicken manure? I miss my true monarch a little bit." It didn't happen that the real monarch scolded Jiang Zhe, but it didn't make any difference. I heard that there was a young sword fairy from Aquarius, who turned out to be a hermit. What kind of official is a hidden official? Where did you become an official? It is the biggest official of the Great Wall of Sword Qi. I'm a good boy. If Jianghu meets this person, wouldn't he have to fight for his life and move forward? It's not a group of people, I definitely can't go together. You can't just scold Jiang Shangzhen as a person, more or less, you still need to understand a little bit of the world. Beside the cliffs of the mountains and seas, when the rain was torrential, a little girl with the nickname Flower, was standing alone by the sea with an umbrella, looking out to the vast expanse of the sea. The little girl squatted down like hiding in a paper umbrella, staring into the distance. I heard a truth from Sister Feitsue. I especially like it without saying it, just like a silent whale landing. The little girl actually doesn't understand, but she sounds a little sad. On the Wind and Kite Ferry, Millet Grange Chai Wu. By Xin Sunchun. These 4 people are not only very familiar, but they also seem to have a tacit understanding. When they are free, they gather a bunch and come to the right guard's room to meet. Chai Wu's drinks are now under the control of the right guardian. Just like King Sun Chun, although in Bai Xian's opinion she is still such a dead fish-eyed girl, she doesn't like to drink and she doesn't know how to drink tea, but after practicing swordsmanship she always comes to Chai Wu to sit down, but in fact I was seated and I never dared to talk about Chai Wu. Unless the right guardian was present, blind fish-eye would nibble on melon seeds, and there would be a little movement, otherwise he would be silly sitting there motionless like a ghost, comparing pressure. The little dumb at the old shop talked less. Today is the gathering of 4 people again to discuss the great cause. Accidentally talked about the meaningless practice, Bai Xian began to use the elder's tone to teach Chai Wu, who is the lowest realm at the moment. Chai Wu drank a big sip of wine and for his own reason, Mr. Xiao Mo and Sect Master Chui told me not to worry about breaking the border. With pity in his eyes, Bai Xian sipped a sip of wolfberry tea and said, "Vegetation, this is the 2 of them comforting you. You really believe that, besides Lu Jin, there are actually different names? What are they called? Don't you know? Help Chai Wu get a nickname." "Plants, there is that, let Chai Wu pick one by himself." Chai Wu wondered, "What?" Bai Xian rolled his eyes, "Don't hurry up and ask our right guardian for advice." Millet Grain scratched his face and whispered, "It seems to be called remaining in a human environment." Bai Xian immediately gave a thumbs up to the right guardian, "Very knowledgeable." The Millet Grains forced a smiley face, but in fact there is no happiness. This kind of exaggeration is too fake. Chai Wu picked up the wine bowl and took a sip of wine. "Don't worry." After the meeting, the Millet Grains began to patrol the mountains and watch the night on the ferry. While there was no one around, the right guardian stole a little lazy, put down the golden pole and green bamboo stick, stood one by one, fell into dantian, closed his eyes, thought for a while, and then slowly fisted, yelling to himself said, "Pinch a needle, swipe a large fist, throw a fist like an arrow, close a fist like a sword." This is a set of peerless boxing techniques that Pei Chen secretly taught himself after the crazy sword technique. Pei Chen said besides her master, there are 2 kinds of boxing techniques in the world, which are also old and domineering. One is the self-taught Wang Bakwen, and the other is the Tianxiao faction. Xiaomi Li asked Pei Chen what is called Tianxiao Pai. Pei Chen only said that it is a famous big gang of rivers and lakes, who can make money with punches. A large amount of copper money, just like rain, goes to his own bowl. "Come here." Miu lay on the railing side upstairs, secretly watching the Millet Grains practice boxing there. Wait until the girl in black stopped her fists and stood still, took a deep breath, and again carried the golden pole on her shoulders and held the green bamboo stick, swinging around the ferry again and again. Miu smiled softly, then yelled softly, "Millet Grains, Mani?" Xiaomi Li turned his head and looked upstairs, smiled and said, "I can't sleep and wander around." Miu tipped his toes, supported on the railing with one hand, floating on the side of the deck, hugged the back of his head with both hands, and wandered with the Millet Grains. Xiaomi Li raised his head and asked, "Mida Jianxian, do you miss home?" Miu shook his head and smiled, "Nothing. The only people who can call me you a big sword fairy without getting angry are the hidden officials and Millet Grains." The little girl in black raised the trekking pole, scratched her head with her fist, apologized and whispered, "I made you sleepless? When I walk at night I will walk lighter." Miu is almost ready to hear her. She only hates that Xiaomi is not her daughter. She squinted and shook her head and said, "How is it possible? The right guardian just strode." Xiaomi Lian let out a hey. Miu remembered something that Bai Xian had talked about and asked with a smile, "I heard that the right guardian is invincible with people guessing boxing?" Xiaomi Li smiled awkwardly, "What is it?" Frinkled 2 sparse and yellowish little eyebrows, the right guard is a little confused. Who is so well informed even know this? In fact, it is the uncle Bai Xian who accidentally saw the millet patrolling the mountain to the stream of Luapa Mountain, squatting by the river, grabbing the rocks, catching a crab, playing boxing. After winning, the little girl in black jumped and continued to patrol the mountain, not forgetting to say to herself, "Alas, sorrow, today is another big victory." Looking at Bai Xian to laugh, he almost rolled around on the floor, finally clutching his stomach, and forcibly resisted not laughing. Miu also talked about loyalty, and did not betray the Bai Xian who accidentally leaked his mouth. After all, this guy is already miserable enough. The hermit is already waiting for Bai Xian on Shindu Mountain. If he adds such an account, more money? Miu smiled and said, "If you don't guess the boxing, then guess the riddle?" Open. Xiaomi Li's eyes lit up. This is his own unique skill. Yumi, guess what? Who is often lost and can't find home? What? Ha, it's an elk. That's it. Who would often slip and fall when patrolling the mountains? Let me think about it. Forget it, I can't think of it. It's a fox. Mida Jianxian, forget it today, don't guess. I'm going to leave those riddles at the bottom of the box and I will ask the good man, the mountain lord, to be smarter than you. He always thinks about it. When I think about it, I can figure out the answer. After all, he is the hidden officer. The good guy mountain lord occasionally thinks that it is not enough, but you have to think twice or 3 times. The riddle of the right guardian is so powerful? Actually, I know that the good man mountain master deliberately thought about it a little bit or two, but the good man mountain master doesn't know about it yet. Okay, I will help keep it secret. Aquarius Island. As a report about the landscape of the divine island in the Middle Earth, it spreads to Bay of Pingzu. Up and down the mountains and rivers of the whole continent are shaking. It turns out that in Aquarius Island we have big horses, embroidered tigers and hidden officials. A child of the Sioux family who returned to his hometown, and a few classmates who had just known each other for a short time, went out on a negative study tour together. The journey was not far, only in the state. In addition to walking through the official roads of counties, they will also travel through mountains and rivers, explore the secluded visits, copy the inscriptions, and pass the temples of the city gods and the gods of the mountains and rivers along the way. The young man surnamed Su did not know that those landscape gods would quietly show up, secretly escorting a mountain and water journey, until they reached the border of the jurisdiction before returning to their temples. And this young man was always kept in the dark, not knowing that there were 2 lanterns hanging behind him, each with a signature. One is Luopashan Chin Pingon. One is a hidden official. Therefore, behind this Sioux clan's child, there will be a slim-looking swordsman in a blue shirt, with a pair of golden eyes, but with his eyes closed for a long time, with a sword behind him. Like a supreme god, silently sheltering the young. Shindu Mountain Qingping Jianzong. Wearing a blue shirt, he left the small cave and came to the star peak of Limiao Mountain, where his disciple Chao Qingqing retreats. In the cave sky temporarily used as the dojo, outside the top floor of the Jianghu immortal mansion, there are 3 golden rain curtains hung, and each rain line is made up of a text of the 3 religions classics. After Qin Pingon confirmed that there was indeed no problem with the spiritual flow of the entire premium mountain, he was a little relieved, but he still did not leave. He stopped under an ancient pine outside the secret mansion gate. Saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new, another spring will come, never returning to the young boy. Note 1 from readers. Sword of Coming Chapter 908. A couple of young men and women on the southeastern coast of Ao Ping Chao strolled through a racking shop in a county seat, and then came to the wine shop next door, and picked a table against the wall. The man ordered a caddy of mao-chai wine and some side dishes with wine, the woman an extra plate of salted plum breast. The man looked up at the poems written on the wall of the village middle school. The woman glanced, twisted a sour plum and chewed it. It was sour. The man took out a book from the bookcase and put it on the table while serving a bowl of alcohol, while flipping through a book on physiognomy. He likes to read miscellaneous books, and even the art of wind horn, bird occupying and loneliness is involved in daily life. The good name is that there are more arts and no pressure when you go out, one more craft, one more job. A woman's eyebrows are winding like a spring mountain. She seemed to be worried, frowning, and couldn't help but ask in her heart, "Yulu, do you think I can refuse his request?" Someone sent her a letter before saying that she was planning to take her as a registered disciple. It's not the kind of protege who enters the house, and it's okay to change the house or stand on her own when she enters the upper 5 realms in the future, but the other party is more so. She was so talkative, the more she felt lost in her heart. In fact, she was bullied by that unpredictable guy on the way to study. Yulu said, "I think it's actually a good thing. This is something that is destined to be irresistible, and it is useless to think more." It's just that Yulu didn't say this sentence, lest thank you for hearing it more and more worrying. After all, the sender is Cui Dongshan. Thank you angrily, do you think? Then why don't you become his registered disciple? Yulu smiled and put it down. As a pure martial artist himself, what can Cui Dongshan teach? Besides, he has such a relationship with Chen Pingyan, Cui Dongshan really dare not take advantage of him. Thank you for knowing that I was so irritated, and it didn't make sense to provoke my anger, so I raised the wine bowl as a plea for it. Yulu patiently explained, now that your status has changed, Cui Dongshan will soon become the lord of the sect. After getting along with you, he will converge a lot. Moreover, Cui Dongshan has a high realm and many magic weapons. Aside from the strange temper, he will be the one. Preacher, right, for any earth fairy it is a good thing to dream of. Thank you for still worrying. General, ordinary, reasonably, These statements, resting on the big white goose, have never worked. Thank you for holding back your smile and looking serious. If you can't save your face, it's okay. When you turn back to Xindu Mountain, you'll find a chance to say hello to Qin Pingon privately. You can't trust Cui Dongshan. I can always trust Qin Pingon, right? It is estimated that I don't need to say anything. Qin Pingon will help you say something serious in Cui Dongshan. Cui Dongshan is lawless and dare not listen to his husband's lessons. Thank you for a little peace of mind, and sighed, I hope so. She sincerely envied Yulu and even dared to call the big white goose by name. She couldn't do it. At first I thought that Cui Dongshan served as the next sect lord, each on one continent, far away, so after receiving that letter, let me thank you for all these days of fear and delay in practice, always unable to concentrate. When a group of people traveled far to Desui Mountain Cliff Academy, Yulu quickly became a golden martial artist, but after so many years, it was still an eclosion realm that covered the earth and traveled far away. No matter how great Yulu is, no matter how hard he is to win or lose, he will feel a little guilty. After all, for 30 years Yulu's martial arts realm has only risen by one level. Yulu's basic aptitude and martial arts talent are actually excellent. This is the sequelae of the pure martial arts shortcut, making it extremely difficult to break the bottleneck of Yulu's far travel. On the other hand, thank you. Later Cui Dongshan pulled out all the trap dragon nails. The practice of thank you was smooth sailing. Now it is a golden elixir with loose bottleneck. One is the fallen prince of the Lu dynasty, and the other is the fairy mansion, the leader of the mountain in the Lu dynasty, and the proud daughter of heaven who has high hopes. Over the years, Yulu and Thank You, these two fellow villagers and classmates, seem to have been traveling together. It's hard to say that they are inseparable, but they can be regarded as getting along day and night. It's just that the two sides didn't give birth to any love between men and women. Thank you for asking. I acted impulsively in the past. Would I regret it? Of course I would regret it, so I didn't have the confidence to ask Qin Pingon about it. Can I not be angry if I replaced it with you? I'm just kind of forgiving and I don't like it. If you're horny or you want just regret it, you'll have to regret your intestines and you will definitely be stunned every day. Maybe he's an alcoholic now. Yulu took a sip of wine, opened a page of the book and said with a smile, it's just regrets and regrets. You still have to do what you should do. Even if you start over, it's the same choice. You will be angry and regret it. Thank you for being a survivor of a prisoner in her early years. The person she hates most is not even the Dali woman or Cui Dongshan who took her as a maid, but the crown prince who has no pain of subjugation, and can even be said to be hate. Therefore, from the ancestral house of the Yuan family in Erlang Lane, to the Great Sui dynasty all the way, thank you for hating the prince who has a loose temperament and an indifferent look on the face of the sky. Until the Desui Mountain Cliff Academy, because of Li Huai's turmoil, Yulu did not hesitate to rely on a country's remnant martial arts and some secret method to get into the Golden State, and beat the young sage out of the academy. The best choice is for Yulu to use his own ability to steadily enter the Golden State and the far-traveling realm, the 8th realm to the 9th realm, or when he sprints from the top of the mountain, when the big bottleneck of a certain day is difficult to break, he will use that share. Martial operation is a stepping stone, a ladder, and more go up one floor. Thank you for that. I have improved my impression of Lu. Although I am heartless, I still have a little responsibility and it is not useless. Just waited until Yulu was not doing business in the academy every day, just fishing by the lake, and mixing well with the great Sui Prince Gao Xian. Thank you for starting to bother him again. Today Yulu still likes fishing, but all the fish will be released on the banks of the big river, and thank you. I often meet some people in the same way. Even if he does not hold a pole, he can squat aside and watch for a long time, claiming to be fishing. People like to watch people are fishing. Yulu smiled and said, speaking of which, the foundation of the far-reaching environment that I have worked so hard for more than 10 years is not too bad. Thanks for squinting and smiling. Don't say you are safer than Chao Xiaichen. How about by Pei Qian? Yulu helplessly said, it's better to compare me with Qin Pingon. How many times did Pei Qian win the martial arts as the strongest in a certain realm? It's really an unimaginable thing. The weird little tired lazy guy back then really knew how to learn boxing, and it was so good. Thank you for asking for no reason. I haven't thought about finding a way to go up the mountain to practice. I heard that there is a Pushen Yunkatang in Tonggishao. There is a unique secret method that can allow the martial artist to practice immortality. You can try your luck. Okay, anyway, we've been shopping around these years after passing the entire Aquarius Island. It is enough to travel to Tongyer Island. Yulu laughed dumbly, was silent for a moment and shook his head. I never thought about being a god. In the back room of the wine shop, someone lifted the green bamboo curtain gently and put it down again. Thank you for glancing diagonally. It turned out that it was a young girl standing behind the curtain, staring affectionately at someone. Yo, the action is not light. Why didn't the little girl just tore off the whole bamboo curtain so Yulu could hear it more realistically? Thank you for asking. When are you going to visit Miss Mao and Fairy Moo? The two sides met at an ancient battlefield site and a xianxia ferry crossing, and met two extremely brilliant young women due to fate. Thank you for not being blind. I can see that the two of them fell in love with Lu at first sight. Yulu smiled and said, "It's just a perfunctory polite remark. It's like getting together again when I have time. Next time I'll check out. Do you want to add 2 more dishes? Whoever listens to it is really stupid." Listening to Yulu's words is funny. Thank you for laughing. Among his classmates in previous years, Lin Shui was a wise man in the academy and once served as a gift to the Qidu temple. Even Li Huai is a wise man. Now, Li Baoping, who is studying at a certain academy in Shenzhou, is already 2 gentlemen who have been tested by Zhigang Jijiu in person, and they are female masters who are able to preach to Confucian scholars in the academy. It's just that in the history of Haoran, there has never been a precedent for a woman to serve as the head of the 72nd Academy, or to learn from the palace. Yulu closed the book and asked, "When shall we go to Jianghu?" Today's Dilijianghu is the location of thank you for the martial arts. Because the master, who thanked him, resolutely rejected the surrender of the Dali court, which led to the collapse of the school. "Thank you for your pale face." Yulu whispered, "If you don't go, you can't make it. Thank you for lowering your head, biting your lip and finally shaking your head." Yulu smiled and said, "Then don't worry. Yulu is good at this as if he can do anything at will." Thank you for a sigh of relief and nodding. "I will definitely go." It was like a promise to Lu and it seemed to cheer myself up. Yulu gathered the sound and said, "Are you not curious about the letter Chui Dongshan sent me? Or have you guessed the content?" "Thanks for being silent." Yulu exuded a sad look, muttering to himself, "Continuing the country in a foreign country, can it really be regarded as rejuvenation?" "Thank you for drinking all the wine in the bowl," and said with a cheerful expression, "Forget it, why doesn't it count? When you arrive at Tongyi's house, choose a place. It doesn't matter if the site is not big. First, carefully plan for 10 or 20 years. When I enter the nascent soul realm, you will become the emperor and I will be the country." Division. Xinchu Prefecture, Huaihuang County. Li Huai led the gentleman through the street and across the alley, and found Dong Shuijing, who had arranged to meet here at an opening in a narrow and secluded alley. Dong Shuijing made a special trip back to his hometown to meet Li Huai. Li Huai joked, "It won't delay Dong Bancheng's making big money, right?" Dong Shuijing smiled and said, "You don't need to stare at the account books, and you can make money if you don't plan the transaction personally." Dong Shuijing led Li Huai to his ancestral home, cooked 3 bowls of wontons and served them to the table. In the yard, next to a well, a willow tree was planted. Li Huai only pretended that he hadn't seen anything, and only hated that he had only one sister. Taoist Nin saw through Dong Shuijing's realm at a glance. It is not surprising that in this old Liju cave heaven and earth realm, a young nascent infant realm, not an ascending realm, is there any fuss? It's a strange thing for my son's friend to have no ability. If you meet an old Yuanying monk who has lived for hundreds of years on the road, it is estimated that Taoist Nen will be shocked. How to practice waste. Maybe you have to ask in person, "Old boy, are you worthy of this precious place of geomantic omen in your hometown?" Dong Shuijing seemed to perceive the thoughts of the yellow-clothed old man, and smiled. It's just the realm of piled-up money that made Senior Tao Ting laugh. The Taoist Nen is not surprised that the other party knows his old identity, and money can make ghosts push him. Dong Banqing in Ao Pingzhou has a rich family background that should not be underestimated. Taoist Nen smiled heartily. No matter how the state came from, the state is the state. In this vast world, who would dare to laugh at the Lu Kaishan of Aizhou? Putting it on Xiaodong, the same truth. When it comes to Xiaodong, Taoist Nen sighs. I think back then he also chased a Xiaodong, who passed by 100,000 mountains. When Li Huai slapped the table, Taoist Nen shut up immediately, dare to say something wrong. Li Huai gave a thumbs up. Well, delicious. 2 more bowls. It can be seen that Dong Shuijing often came to the ancestral house. When Li Huai had eaten another bowl of wontons, Dong Shuijing had set up a brazier, squatting on the side and simmering taro roasted rice dumplings. Pulling off the thread and peeling the zong leaves, a zongzi in Dong Shuijing's hand was roasted into golden color. Seeing that Li Huai was hungry again, he grabbed the zongzi and gave half of it to the Taoist tender. Dong Shuijing had to peel off another zongzi, and the three of them sat around the stove. Dong Shuijing whispered, "The husband of croak braids, Bien Wenmao has just taken up the post of the academician in our state, but he has not been promoted. It is regarded as being released from outside the capital. The place is gilded, but Shuijing, a new and noble post created by the Dali court for a few years, can't be found by ordinary people. Usually, he is the old official of the 6 branches of Beijing from the Imperial Academy. He is hopeless for promotion. Before returning to his hometown, His Majesty deliberately gave these civil officials a special honor. The academic politics itself has no rank, just like the Ling and Qing states on the side of the city under the jurisdiction of the capital, which are divided by an old servant of the Ministry of Industry in Hong Kong. He served as the secretary of the temple. Now Bien Wenmao's official is Guanglu Temple Cheng, and his tenure expires after 4 years of studying in the prefecture. When he returns to the capital, he should serve as the Shaoqing of Guanglu Temple. It is unlikely that he will take charge of Guanglu Temple in the future. Larger, more or less to go to the 6 yamen, or to go outside again to accompany the capital, tired all the way to a certain position and finally got a ranking. After the bachelor's title, there is hope that he will get a good posthumous title in the future, and even if he shares the temple, Bien Wenmao himself does not dare to think about it. Li Huai gnawed at the rice dumplings with a dazed expression. Ha! The Taoist Nen was full of emotion. Xiaodong Shushu talked about it for a long time, and his son only needs to answer one word concisely. Dong Shuijing smiled and said, "You are a sage in the academy. According to the new regulations of the Confucian Temple, you will inevitably have to deal with the Dali court in the future. These seemingly tedious and boring official affairs will be exposed sooner or later. Nowadays, the officialdom of Dai is frequently mobilized. From the capital to the local area, the post roads are busy. Only the top leaders of the states, counties in the Hsinchu prefecture have almost all changed faces. Wu Yuan, serving as the provincial governor, left his post in Huaihuang County Magistrate sadly that year, and killed a proud and beautiful back carbine. And that Huang Tinghua civil servant who took office as Longzhou Governor Wei Li, now went to Dali to accompany the capital to succeed the ceremonial book. Prior to this, Chao Gingxin, the chief officer of the Kiln Affairs Supervision and Construction Office, was transferred from Longzhou supervisor to the right assistant of the Ministry of Industry of the companion capital, and then promoted to the official assistant of Dali capital, and was able to rank in the center. Yuan Jingding was promoted to the governor of Hangzhou, a neighbor in the north. Jing Quan, the new prefect of Baoshi County of Chuzhou, was once the middleman of the Qing Lizi from the Ministry of Households in the capital, and was in charge of the money bags of Hangzhou and the 3 inner states. But in fact, many times Dong Shuijing, a hidden Mahist credit knife man, would envy Li Huai's kind of drifting with the crowd, or just going with the situation. Li Huai said with a guilty conscience, "I know that our classmate, Zhao Yao, is now serving as the least criminal minister. There are also former parents, Guanlao Xianzun, Wu Yuan is now back here as the governor of Xan Chuzhou. There is another Chao Duzhao who likes to drink but doesn't like a bit of alcohol. A few years ago, it seemed that he was transferred to the bureau of the capital to become a high official?" Dong Shuijing smiled and asked, "What more?" Li Huai sighed, "It's gone." Taoist Nen began to fight against the injustice. "Why do you have to stick to these common affairs under the mountain with the government?" Li Huai shook his head, "We are different from Dali." Regardless of how his title of a sage fell from the sky, and how it hit him, since he became a sage, Li Huai was unwilling to do much worse than others. "When I was a child, I was on the road to study in the wilderness at night. When Chen Pingan was helping to watch the wind, he once said something in his heart with Li Huai, but now I can't remember it clearly. Li Huai only remembers a general idea, saying that a person was a child when he was a child. It only in the years when there is such a thing as reading, am not afraid that I can't remember the sage principles in those books, am afraid that I'm not willing to do this thing well so I don't have to go to school in the future so I can't do it easily. Good next thing. Li Huai said at the time that I was just not suitable for studying. Chen Pingan said that he is not suitable for making porcelain, learning things too slowly, and always unable to keep up with his hands, but as long as he works hard, he will always have a better chance to do the next thing in the future." Taoist Nen immediately changed his words and said, "The son is so humble, so why not worry about it? It's not that Tao Ting is spineless, but that the old blind man is too arrogant. For example, on this trip to protect Li Huai on a long journey, the old blind man gave Tao Ting a word, and whenever my disciple was a little frightened, he would break your 5 legs. Poor Nin Taoist, Now I'm afraid that Li Huai will accidentally burn his mouth when drinking tea. A soaring realm is worthy of being a Taoist protector. Not to mention that there will be no one in the future, and it is destined to be unprecedented. Even so, the old blind man seemed to be worried about Li Huai. He was far away in the wild world. I don't know what ancient mystery was used. The old blind man was able to directly enter Li Huai's dream realm, and then drag Taoting, the ascending realm, into it casually. The Taoist Nen is like returning to the 100,000 mountains. In this night the earth shook and thundered. Li Huai got up in a dream, and ran out of the hut to take a look. One piece of golden light, dense golden armor. The puppets clustered together. One of the golden armored puppets higher than the mountain, knelt on one knee at the foot of the mountain, slowly raised the huge head, and gradually became level with the mountain, staring at Li Huai. The old blind man walked slowly to the edge of the cliff, grabbed the arm of the disciple who was grabbed halfway through his life, and together with a ghost symbol, said to Li Huai something that made Tao Ting's eyelids tremble, "They will be yours in the future." Tao Ting took a peek at Li Huai's face carefully, and there was not even the slightest spirit or lofty ambition, only fear in his eyes. "My son is good at everything, but he has no ambition to be a man. If you have the opportunity, you must risk your life to speak up." It turned out that the old blind man stepped on his back, crunching and breaking again. In the end, Li Huai just said, "Can I listen to Qin Pinggan's suggestion first?" The old blind man unexpectedly nodded his head and agreed, and helped his disciple adjust his collar. At the same time, he complimented Li Huai in an old-hearted and pleased tone, and followed his master in doing things steadily. The two masters and apprentices asked and answered, and heard the tender Taoist who silently put a spine on the ground. He almost didn't stare his dog eyes into the eyes of the old blind man. There was a knock on the door of the house. A visitor came to the door. In order to avoid suspicion, Li Huai had to stand up and say goodbye. Dong Shuijing smiled and said, "You don't have to go, it was made by our Jian supervisor. He wanted to make a contribution to his career. It was a pity that he couldn't do anything. In recent years he has been bumped and he has not suffered less." The new kiln affairs supervisor in the prefecture, before he took office, was very energetic. "I only felt that Chao Gingxin, a idle drunkard, could be promoted on the basis of his days. If he goes, he will be a big and small official office. Will be handled in an orderly manner. A kiln supervising and building office, openly and secretly, actually hangs 2 official plaques, so the chief official has 2 official titles at the same time. The supervision bureau, together with several weaving bureaus newly built in Dei, and the logging yard set up in Hangzhou for example, in fact they are all the eyes and ears of the emperor, and the secret information of the chief officials can reach the sky. As a result, when Jian Fengzhen arrived in Huaihuang County, he bumped into walls everywhere. The big names in the town had complicated relationships, intertwined roots, and extremely huddled together. Taifujiang, the of water Yanghua, had a high level of landscape and a great backing. The 3 river gods of embroidery, Chongdan, and Yuya near Hangzhou town, like him, the Chituan mountain Song Yuzhang, plus the city gods of the cities gods at all levels of the prefecture counties and counties. Wu Miao. Anyway, no one takes him seriously as a 4th-ranking superintendent. When he arrived, he was full of ambition and waited for half a year, but no one took the initiative to visit the superintendent at night. "Okay. If you don't look for me, I will look for you, but I didn't eat too much. Even if I got in, there was nothing on both sides." Talkable. Jian Feng had to write a letter to ask a friend in Beijing, the former local county guard, who has now been promoted to the post of Hangzhou Governor Yuan Jingding. When he was a child in Ichiali, Beijing, he liked to follow the older Yuan Jingding, studying with peace of mind and not hearing things outside the window. Yuan Jingding did reply a letter, but it turned out to be a blank piece of letter paper without a word on the letter. However, after Jian Feng figured out some officialdom, he began to pinch his nose to learn from the former supervisor, watch more, listen more, talk less and go out. Fortunately, there is no limit to the number of years for the post of supervisor. It's just that it's not a problem to be so staring, so as soon as he heard that Dong Banqing had returned to his hometown, Jian Feng immediately visited him. Of course it was a private visit by WeChat. Seeing the young man in Confucian shirts and the old man in yellow clothes, Jian Feng also said politely, "I recognize Li Huai, a native of the small town, and now a wise man of Xianxia Academy." As for the kind-looking old man, he was an unfamiliar face, and there was no relevant secret file record on the superintendent's office. Before Jian Feng came, he had been recorded in the book. At the same time, he sent someone to Nujiadu to read Li Huai's office. Take the ferry and stay as usual, the customs clearance record. Dong Shuijing didn't seem to understand the rules of officialdom at all. He didn't let Li Huai and the old man leave the slightly shabby room, and he didn't even mean to move the two of them. If it had just been an office, Jian Feng would have felt unhappy. He would have eaten too much soft nails and closed doors, and had already polished his edges and temperament. Dong Shuijing invited Jian Du Zhao to take a seat, and then handed him a zongzi. Jian Feng thanked him and he patted the dust on the zongzi and then ate it. This kind of thing does not require Jian Feng to pretend to be approachable. Although it is big, he was born in the Li family, but Jian Feng studied at Xuanhuan Academy for many years in his early years. During this period he made a lot of money on the road during several trips. Therefore Yuan Jingding often joked that he should work in the household department. Just because there were outsiders present today, Jian Feng had to start playing official accents as an opening remarks, chatting with Dong Shuijing about the kiln affairs. After all, now many kiln mouths are no longer official kills, and this Dong Banqing is hiding behind the scenes. Quite a few had almost monopolized the entire wealth of the export of porcelain. Like the Baoshi kiln that had been converted into a private kiln, it was now assigned to a certain puppet merchant supported by Dong Shuijing. Dong Shuijing talked and laughed happily with him, dripping water tightly and coping appropriately. Li Huai was impressed. Jian Feng was actually mentally prepared to return without success. Before the zongzi in his hand had finished eating, he casually chatted about the preparation of the local school, and Dong Shuijing asked someone to fund it on his behalf. There are some areas that are debatable for building roads and bridges. A lot of money cannot be spent on the blade. These things are beyond the scope of the Kiln Supervision and Construction Bureau. What's more, they are trivial. Jian Feng is the superintendent. It's really boring to be an official. In my eyes, I feel there are really too many details to be perfected. Since I finally met Dong Banqing today, it was just a few words of nonsense outside the officialdom. Even if it was offensive, it didn't matter. Sure enough, Dong Shuijing was very perfunctory, only to ask later when he was free. Jian Feng knew that 10% was out of play. After leaving the house, walking alone in the back alley, Jian Feng gave a wry smile, and now he is busy again. He deserves to be said secretly that he is the worst superintendent in history. Li Huai stopped talking in the room. Dong Shuijing shook his head and said with a smile, "The muffled sound that hits the wall is conscience." Li Huai asked, "Is it from the book or Qin Pingan?" Dong Shuijing couldn't help laughing. Li Huai smiled and said, "You drop out of school early and study less. You are worse than me." Dong Shuijing hesitated, but he held back for a long time but still couldn't ask. Li Huai suddenly understood what Dong Shuijing wanted to ask. "If you just choose one of the two, I will definitely choose you as your brother-in-law." Dong Shuijing was skeptical. "I saw Lin Shui, how would you answer the same question?" Li Huai laughed. Dong Shuijing didn't break the casserole anymore and asked to the end. He just turned his head and looked at the willow tree next to the well in the courtyard, soft and weak, and the man's eyes were as gentle as the willow tree. A Qingshui Yamen under the jurisdiction of the Vehicle Driving Department of the Ministry of Defense, located in the post office of the post office in Capsule Hudong, today came two dignitaries from officialdom who have never set foot here. One was from his own family in the Ministry of War, and the other was an official from the Ministry of Rights. Both of them had the official title of a collaborator, and they were both the most powerful Lang officers in the capital of the Dali court. The surnamed Fu Minghu, who is the head of the Good News Office, has a very promising brother named Fu Yu. He entered Beijing from the local area not long ago to report and resigned as the prefect of Baoshi County in Old Longzhou. Flat, I just took it one of Rin Ziajiking's Zhan Xiwan was Xiao Zhanshi, and was in charge of Zhuchunfeng. Fu Hu was respectful and scared of this cousin who had a successful career. In addition, Fu Yu was elder Fu Hu for another round, which meant that the eldest brother was the father. Today, after Fu Hu finished his official duties, he was holding a piece of mutton jade with Erlang's legs upright. When he heard the news from the concierge, he was shocked and gave him all the drinks from the Changpu River last night. I woke up in shock and mistakenly thought that I was on an errand and made a big mistake. In the early years of the history of the Liu family, there was a case of theft of the seal box in the lobby of the Ministry of War. The involvement was widespread. The emperor was furious. Qting's sails melted, causing the entire military department of the Lu's temple to lose a lot of official hats and heads. At that time, the officialdom of the Dali Song family, which was a vassal state of the Liu family, was treated as a joke. Knowing that he was rushing to the old forest, Fu Hu paced twice in the house, stomping his feet, or preparing to break into the Dragon Lake and Tiger Den thinking of that old Lin. He has been conscientious over the years, working hard and resenting like an old scalper, getting along with himself, and the relationship is extremely harmonious. He has done everything he does, and he has kept himself safe and does not fight for power. Besides, I'm the top spot in the good news office anyway, so I have to protect my brothers in the office. Only when Fu Hu got outside Lin Zhengqing's office building and saw the two inside, he immediately lost his courage so that he didn't even notice. When he saw the two uninvited guests, he just sat on the stove. Beside on the chair, he leaned forward and stretched out his hands to keep warm, but he didn't even get up to wait for the guests. The shelf was as big as a 6-book book. We must know that the two people standing in the house, the gray-haired old man, and the burly man who looked imposingly, were the doctor who sacrificed to the Qing clerk at the Libu Shrine, and the doctor who chose the military department of the Ministry of War. These two official positions have always been important candidates for the national teacher Cui Yang to personally delineate, and there is no need for the Ministry of War, the Minister of Etiquette, or the Minister to review and approve. As soon as Lin Zhengqing stood up, the leader who moved abruptly after probing his head at the door, has disappeared without a trace. Lin Zhengqing had to sit back in the chair and nodded with the two officials. I understand what your majesty meant. I will leave for Yuzhang County logging yard immediately. The old man smiled and said, it was supposed to be the leader of the staff, Shirlang Chao, who came to the office to inform Mr. Lin in person, but when Shirlang Chao heard that he was going to see Mr. Lin, he immediately smashed his feet and was busy asking people to find plasters. Chao Gingxin has served as the supervisor of Longzhou kills for many years. Only because of his position, he has the opportunity to have access to a confidential file such as Dali. In the sky of Lizhu Cave, there was an extremely hidden post status, without officials and no grades. For the Dali court, it was more important than the Kiln affairs supervisors and officials of the past dynasties. The name is the Horror, which means the gatekeeper. This talent is the true emperor's eyes and ears of the Dali court, the emperor of the Song family of Dali, or the true confidant of the national teacher Cui Yun. And the last Dali who was inserted in the Lizhu cave was Lin Shuyi's father, the former assistant officer of the Supervision Bureau, and now the Sesame officer of the Beijing Post News Office, Lin Zhengqing. And Chao Gingxin has a bigger guess. In the days of the Lizhu cave, Lin Zhengqing is very likely to retain the identity of the gangster in the capital of Lizhu. Once the young mountain lord of Luopishan broke up with the Song clan of Daily one day, the two sides were completely torn apart. This Lin Zhengqing was the last flood control dam left by the national teacher Cui Yang to Dei capital. At least it can guarantee that Qin Pingan will not go on a slaughter. Although Chao Gingxin didn't understand why a low-level middle 5 cultivator could do this step, but Chao Gingxin adheres to a purpose anyway, and people who can't afford it, don't contact them at all. Seeing that the two were still stuck on the spot, the man asked, so anxious, urging me to go on the road? The old man laughed dumbly, was silent for a moment and shook his head and said, don't dare. Since there was no place to sit, the Wu Xianxia Lang had arms around his chest, leaning on the door, and he was hiding something from this guy. I'm indeed quite curious. If it were not for this unusual official transfer, he would not have had a chance to learn about Lin Zhengqing's what a background. In fact, he, the military officer of the military election department of the Ministry of War, is leading the way for this old guy who is standing next to him. In fact, in the officialdom, he has no control over Lin Zhengqing, the future head of the Yuzhang County logging house. Hangzhou established a new yamen called the logging yard, which was only in charge of arresting those who hacked huge trees in name. Similar to the Kiln Supervision and Manufacturing Bureau in Chuzhou and the Silk Weaving Bureau in Wuzhou, the ranks of the chief officials are high and low, but they are almost the same. In Hangzhou, which borders on the north of Chuzhou, there is a famous Yuzhang County. In addition to being the ancestral home of the Queen Mother of Daily, it has been rich in towering trees since ancient times, and it is also rumored to be the place where the 12 swords and immortals witnessed the emergence of Taoism in ancient times. So Dali officialdom element, here comes the humorous saying, De Yuzhang, Xiao Hangzhou. Seeing that the two had no intention to leave, Lin Zhengqing smiled and asked, otherwise, he'll be here at this good news office and set a table for the two to entertain them? The old doctor felt helpless. Those of you locals who walked out of Lizhu Cave, except that Dong Shuijing is a little better. In addition, very few words are pleasant to your ears. The reason why staying here is an eyesore is to help your majesty, and to get a bit of unambiguous words from the man in front of you. Sounds funny. His Majesty, as the monarch of a country, can only be circumspect and ask for an exact answer from an official from the 7th grade. But it's not funny at all. What's even more exaggerated is that this man has deliberately played stupid. Lin Jingqing picked up the tongs, fiddled with the charcoal fire lightly and said to himself, "Someone once said to me a Zen saying, the golden Buddha does not save the furnace, the wooden Buddha does not save the fire, and the clay Buddha does not save the water." The old man nodded and said, "Understood, I will go and reply to your majesty." Two high-ranking doctors left the good news office. When he reached the hood-belt alley outside the door, Mr. Wu Xianxi asked in his heart, "What do you mean?" The old man said, "You and I don't need to understand, your majesty can do it." After hearing that the two lords had left their homes, Fu, who went to Lao Lin's house, hesitated and crossed the threshold. Seeing that Lao Lin was standing, he stretched out his hand and pressed twice, motioning to both of our brothers to sit down and talk, and asked cautiously, "Lao Lin, what did you chat with? Can you talk about it?" Lin Jingqing said, "I am looking for a way out for the relationship, and I will soon go to the logging yard in Yuzhang County, Hangzhou." Fu, who asked, "Or is it the officer?" The man shook his head and said, "Number one in charge." Fu, who was stunned and lowered his voice, "No, if I remember correctly, then the chief officer of the logging house, but the official body of the 6th rank, you are from the 7th rank today. Lao Lin, whose way did you find so arrogant that you can skip half a level directly?" The man laughed and said, "I won't talk about this kind of thing, it's a taboo." Fu, who laughed and patted the shoulder of the man next to him, "Lao Lin, congratulations, congratulations. Seriously, if you just moved somewhere and didn't get promoted?" Fu, who laughed and patted the shoulder of the man next to him. "It's still the same, I'm going to scold you a few words, I have to suspect that you dislike me." Bien Duan was uncomfortable. "Since I was promoted I still skipped the ranks. I didn't say, champ you tonight, let me have a meal. I'll treat you." The man nodded and said, "Master Fu treats you, I will pay for it." Fu, who slapped the man's shoulder again, "Yeah, I've missed it these years." Lao Lin turned out to be a good material for officials. After Fu, who left, the man silently looked at the charcoal fire in the brazier and sighed softly. The sight of the tomb of the couple in Niping Alley. In the past, he stole a trip to the backyard of the Yang family drugstore and found the old man Yang. He broke the rules of the court and made an exception. He was humbled and begged the old man bitterly. There is also this shaking mountain boxing book that went round and finally fell into someone's hands. In the other night, secretly took out some privately collected snake gallstones and threw them into the Dragon-Beard River one by one, just like waiting early for a certain straw-shoe boy with a basket to see and pick it up. In fact, there is only so much that can be done. Don't ask for anything, I just hope that one day I'm not an official, I'm not a so-called bullshit. That lonely child grows up to be a teenager year after year, and then he has a family and business. Then there will be Lin Jingqing when he meets him during the holidays. The other party can send from he called himself Uncle Lin from the bottom of his heart, and he should have a clear conscience and deserve this claim. In the winter of this year, the Zushan Jianfeng of the Taihui Jianzong received an autograph invitation from the master of Luopashan, Qin Shan, inviting the master Lu Jinglong and his disciple Bai Shou to go to Tonggishao to participate in the next spring festival. Zong celebration. Said to be the end of winter before the celebration, the Fengyuan ferry will travel north across the continent to Jidu, and will be anchored at the ferry near the Chongshan office of the Deyuan dynasty. It is troublesome that Sovereign Lu will move a little bit and board the ship to travel south without any expenses. That wasted money for the cross-continent boat trip up. By the way, I reminded Lu Jinglong in the letter. If you like, you can join hands with the ferry Lu Sui from the water by the mountain to travel south to Shindu Mountain. Lu Jinglong took the invitation and Yu Jian came to Pianran Peak. The whitehead asked tentatively, "Lu, can we not go?" Bai Shou had just returned from a tour of Yunyan country, and brought a few juniors from other peaks and 6 younger swordsmen to practice in Yunyan country and the surrounding mountains and rivers. After all, today's whitehead, whether it is genealogical status or the realm of swordsmanship, is considered to be an upright elder and protector of the sect. When a group of young sword repairmen returned to the mountain safely, the Taihuijan Ancestor Masters Hall had a high evaluation of the young Jindan Peak Master of Pianranfeng, meticulous thought, thorough work and experienced rivers and lakes. In that country of Yunyan, Bai Shou did not directly meet with 9 realms Wufu Chui Gongzhuang. The chief guest of the Suiyun sect to raise Yunfeng, now he is very honest and has changed his sex. He is about to become a great good man and restrains his disciples and grandchildren. Don't act recklessly. No, however, Chui Gongzhuang would personally clean up the door, making the martial arts reputation soaring. After a hard walk down the mountain, I never thought of going back to Pianran Peak. Bai Shou would hear such a terrible news and good news, and there will be both sorrow and joy for a time. Not long after his brother Chen's Luopishan was promoted to the sect, he kept on running, and went to the southernmost Tonggishao for a second sect. Of course it was a good thing that could not be better. But the problem is that now by show, let alone seeing the person face to face, just thinks of her, he will be embarrassed. The last time someone came to Pian Ranfing as a guest, misfortune came from the sky, and he was punched and swayed on the spot. The last time it was at Pian Ran Peak on his own site. Someone just passed by. After a punch, the master of the dignified peak, the protagonist of the suzerain, lay on the ground and twitched, as if a martial artist was walking away. Last time again it was at Luapa Mountain. 3 things. If it is true that one can eat a ditch and grow one's wisdom, then today's whiteheads can be regarded as extremely smart. By show even privately found an old deity who is proficient in numerology to help figure out whether he and that guy are at odds with each other. At that time the old was holding the horoscope of Liang Shengchen, confused, and only said that it was nothing, no one would be against anyone, and finally did not forget to say that the master of the mountain by Feng's horoscope is very hard. Lu Jinglong didn't bother to remind Bai Shou that according to Qin Pingan, Pei Qian didn't know his birth date at all, and even his name was fake. Pei Qian took it himself later. It's just this kind of thing Qin Pingan can tell Lu Jinglong, but Lu Jinglong shouldn't reveal the secret to Bai Shou. Lu Jinglong smiled and asked, "What do you think?" No more than a sect of Jindan opening ceremony, any next celebration in the world can be regarded as a rare event in 1,000 years. In accordance with the customary rules on the mountain, as long as it is not the kind of hostile sect that forges dead enemies, within a continent, even if people are not present, a gift will be given as usual. After all, in Ijo there is an extra sect head immortal family out of thin air, how can it be a matter of giving a face to Ijo cultivators? The number of martial arts in a continent is straightforward. You can just look at the number of martial arts in the end. In the same way, the depth of the history of a continent often depends on the number of sections. So just like the Faima sect in Skeleton Beach, Beiju Luzhou no longer waited to see this outsider, but when the Faima sect really gained a foothold and officially held the celebration, most of the immortal powers still had to pinch their noses and give them away. Go for a gift, only it's just that the gift is not heavy, and some of them deliberately just gave away a few snowflakes. The rules are the same, courtesy is light and affection is heavy. If Faima Zong thinks that there is little money, it is that they are not generous. Just waited until the real fire dragon on Lidafeng made an exceptional appearance, came to Myashan and participated in the celebration. The old real man would rarely give a gift of magic treasure. Some immortal mansions with forgetfulness immediately added a belated gift to them. The old real people who are known for their two-sleeved breeze have paid out for an unprecedented time, and there is no reason for others not to spend money or give gifts. Otherwise, it is easy to be missed by the old real people. Bai Shou still didn't give up, saying, "Just send the gift. Qin Pingan will definitely not mind it. If it doesn't work, I won't go. When you see Qin Pingan, when you look back, you will say that I will retreat soon." Lu Jinglong smiled and said, "As long as you don't take the initiative to provoke Pei Qian, she will not compete with you for no reason." Seeing the white head still hesitating, Lu Jinglong didn't want to embarrass the disciple and said empathetically, "If you really don't want to go, just practice your sword at Pian Ran Peak. I will help explain Qin Pingan on the other side of Qin Pingan." In addition to the post, Qin Pingan also sent a secret letter to Lu Jinglong. In the letter, there was a female formation master named Han Zhoujin in the capital city of Dali. A member of the earthly branch monks, there is also a hidden identity. He is the guest of the Yen family in Dali Zizhou. Han Zhoujin has a blessing from the Xianfu ruins. It has a long history and her Fulua accomplishments are quite good, so let Lu Jinglong was on his way to the south, so he stopped at Dei capital for a while to help. Give Han Zhoujin some pointers. Bai Shou gritted his teeth. Go. Anyway, I haven't been to Tonggishao. Lu Jinglong smiled and nodded. The patriarch sighed, hinting at me is to ask you, the peak master, when I plan to accept disciples, so that I can open up branches and leaves for this Pian Ran Peak. In fact, there was a bigger hint at the patriarch hall of Taihuijan swordsmen, and it was to ask the sect master whether he would like to be a Taoist companion. The white head was stunned for a long time, only to feel that he had heard a big joke and grinned. Accepting disciples? Just me? Although I have been going up the mountain with the surname Lu for some years, but the white head always has the feeling that I have just started to practice swords and I will be asked by someone to fall to the ground at any time. Therefore there is no earth fairy monk who can collect the inheritance. Consciousness. In fact, every Kaifeng Dixian on the mountain itself is equivalent to carve out a brand new Dharma lineage for Zhu Shirtang. Bai Shou waved his hand. Don't rush. Above the peak there was a lone person, no disciples, and made a joke, but Lu Jinglong watched the joke alone. If he accepts an apprentice, do I still need the dignity of the teacher? Now that the realm is not enough, there hasn't been a victory in questioning the sword. Is it possible for the disciple in the door to shout, "Master was beaten into a coma," or, "The big thing is not good, Master is lying on the ground again"? Bai Shou thought of something and asked, "What's going on with Xianzong?" Lu Jinglong said, "Yang Yunfeng will take the initiative to conclude an alliance with us soon. There are now more than a dozen mountain forces allied with Taihui Jianzong, except for Chuanlu Garden, Kaik Mansion, and Yunshang on the southeast boundary of a continent. City, as well as several time-honored fairy houses including the Thunder God's house on the west coast, among them the Thunder God's house in Baby Mountain. A few years ago I suffered a dumb sap, and even the golden plaque at the gate of the mountain was deducted from the word God House, and finally caught the two foreign gangsters who seemed to have their brains caught by the door panel. Put it again. Of course, Lu Jinglong and Taihui Jianzong did not have the idea of being the leader of the mountain. This kind of relatively loose agreement is more convenient for business exchanges between each other. It can only be said that it is similar to the relationship of marriage in the mountain. Bai Shou smiled and said, "Then Taihui Jianzong has one more pawn?" Lu Jinglong frowned slightly. The white head immediately raised his hands and took the initiative to admit his mistake, "Just as if I had fart." Lu Jinglong reminded softly, "It is necessary to know that the verbal mistakes of our sword repairers are tantamount to a question of swords in people's hearts. Whether it is a monk or a vulgar son, in everyone's heart lake, there will be heavy stones at the bottom of the water, and every stone may be an unintentional statement by many others on the road of life." Bai Shou hummed, "I will pay attention to it later." The young Jianxiu grinned, "Don't worry, in Pianranfeng Mountain, apart from talking to myself, I don't have much chance to speak. As for the mountain, I don't speak much." In fact, in Lu Jinglong's view, one of the most mysterious formations in the world is the Lizhu cave sky that has been suspended in the air above the northern part of Aquarius for many years. There are generally two types of monks' world. One is that the three religions' sages sit in academies, Taoist temples and temples. They can raise one realm, and even the Yuanying realm can directly cross the sky and become a monk in the Yupu realm. Let Xiaoxiandi become a kind of impossible place with thin spiritual energy, occupying the right time and place, and the foreign monks, because they can't mobilize the slightest aura of heaven and earth, so every time a magic trick is shot, every time a magic weapon is sacrificed, it will consume its own aura, and the more powerful it is, big is like opening a mouth, and this spiritual flow will feed back to Xiaoxiandi, like a kind of tribute offering. The hostile two sides will lose and grow, unless the realm is very different, there will be no suspense of winning or losing. In addition, the great monk relied on the formation to build a small world, which was very confused. In the early days of the Lizhu cave, not only did both the foreign monks involved in it also followed some more mysterious avenue rules, so this time Lu Jinglong planned to attend the next ceremony, except for going to Dali capital to find Nahan. "Zhoujin, I have to go to the old Longzhou boundary in Dei again to see if we can use the stones from other mountains to attack jade without violating the laws and regulations of Dei. To be precise, it is the jade from other mountains. Can grind stones." Regarding this matter, Lu Jinglong mentioned it to Chen Pingon, who was a guest of his own sect last time. Therefore, in the secret letter sent by Chen Pingon this time, he told Lu Jinglong straightforwardly that he should concentrate on studying the remaining rhyme of the formation, because he had already talked to him. Li Court said hello up. Lu Jinglong suddenly received a letter from Fei Jian. Lu Jiqing from Jingwu Palace. The white head asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Lu Jianxian asked someone to ask Jian together. "Ask who?" Bai Shou drew out a yellow calendar from his sleeve and opened it with a thunder, and opened it. "In 3 days it's a good day. Beiju Luzhou's old almanac is probably the only one in the entire Haoran world. In a year there are so many days, Yai Wenjian." Sword of Coming Chapter 909. Above the sea, not long after the sword ferry dragged the moon together, a mountain ferry hovered in the air, and there were 2 large sword boats escorted nearby. Is huge, covering the sky and sun, just drifting over Osmanthus Island. All Xinjia ferry boats that can travel across continents in Beipingzu have long been requisitioned and seconded by the Confucian Temple and the Dei Court. The Osmanthus Island belonging to the Fan clan of Lialongking is no exception. However, not long after the Confucian Temple discussions ended, the old Longqing Ying's family leased a new ferry boat with Iazhao and Luxiazu to maintain trade routes. This kind of thing, although it is suspected of opportunism, is allowed by the Zhongtu Confucian Temple, and it is not prohibited. This makes the few Zongzi Xinjia who can build the cross-continent ferry by themselves, earning a lot of money. On Osmanthus Island, there is a private house called Gui Xiaoyuan. Mrs. Gui rubbed her eyebrows. She was really annoyed by that ferry chase recently. Jin Su held back his laugh, which was harder. It turned out to be the previous reunion at the Middle-earth Confucian Temple. Xianxia said some heart-wrenching remarks. Mrs. Gui, seeing him sincerely, gave in a little bit and said a kind word so that he could go to Osmanthus Island to sit occasionally. At that time she had her own considerations. As Nanyue Dacian monarch, Fan Junmao fell all the way from Yupu stage to Longmen stage. Therefore the Fan family urgently needed an enshrinement from the upper 5 realms, and the one who escorted the intercontinental ferry safely past Jiaolong for many years. The old boat of Go happened to be a disciple of Xianxia, and Mrs. Gui hoped that Xianxia could give more guidance to his disciples in their cultivation. But Mrs. Gui never expected that what she called occasionally was totally different from what Xianxia thought of occasionally. In her expectation, she received an apology letter written by the young hermit. At first, Mrs. Gui felt that Qin Pingan was too worried, but now she began to feel that if Qin Pingan dared to come to Osmanthus Island, she would dare to drive people directly. The small courtyard knocked on the door no more no less just 3 times. Mrs. Gui frowned slightly, she didn't even notice someone approaching the courtyard gate. Jin Su was about to get up and open the door. Mrs. Gui waved her hand to let the disciple stay where she was. She waved her sleeve again and opened the courtyard door. A young Taoist priest stood at the door with a bright smile, and waved to the 2 masters and apprentices in the courtyard. This Fan family ferry did not accept guests who boarded halfway. Jin Su glanced at the young Taoist crown, which was a lotus crown, and she was regarded as a traveling Taoist priest from the gods. Only the Taoist priests of the gods who wear the Taoist crown on their heads will have both a fishtail crown and a lotus crown. It is reasonable to say that Hohhot Island followed the road to the market this time and returned from the wild world to Aquarius Island. There were no passengers on the island, let alone Taoist priests. Ms. Gui was silent, she just said a blessing when she got up. Jin Su quickly followed the master to get up. The young Taoist priest hurriedly bends over to pay the courtesy, and sighs after standing up. Fortunately, Mrs. Gui's appearance remains unchanged for thousands of years, making people forget the vulgarity. Mrs. Gui smiled without saying a word. The young Taoist priest swaggered into the yard. This is the girl Jinsu. It is a match made in heaven for Sun Jiashu to marry the girl Jinsu. The golden osmanthus tree in Aquarius Island was regarded as the orthodox moon palace species by many monks on the mountain in later generations. It was this Taoist priest who went on a boat trip in the early years and encountered Osmanthus Island on the way. Traveling ashore in Zhozhou, passing by Jingui Temple, a handmade ferryman handwriting, and Wang Pa selling melons and boasting. Xian is really idle. It's just that Mrs. Gui didn't think of anything. Lu Chen went to the Qingming world. At the beginning he really had a little disciple of the Taoist ancestor by Yujing, the 3rd head teacher. In fact, during that journey, Lu Chen also met the then Lord of the Gods, and gave some advice to a Taoist boy who had just gone up the mountain to practice. And that little Taoist boy whose surname is Qi is Zhen. Jin Su naturally failed to recognize the identity of the young Taoist master. Even if the other party had identified her identity, she probably wouldn't believe it. Before the young Taoist took a seat, he looked around and asked with a smile, "It's not a coincidence old Gu is not on the ferry?" It turned out that it was Lu Chen who had left the Great Wall of Jianqi. He did not rush to return to the Qingming world, but strictly followed the agreement with Lord Hermit, and must take a trip to Yunxia Mountain in Aquarius. And by Yujing's 3 masters' wind speed is so fast, it is simply, the tortoise crawls. Ms. Gui reluctantly said, "Why should Master Lu ask knowingly? Isn't it because he is not here that you, by Yujing, the 3rd head teacher, are willing to show up?" After Lu settled down, he tapped his finger on the tabletop. The meaning was obvious. What about the wine? Jin Su asked Master with his own heart, whether he should take out a few jars of sweet-scented osmanthus to treat the guests. Of course Mrs. Gui did not agree. She did not want to have too much overlap between Hohhot Island and the 3 Palms. The fairy chase, Gu Qingsong, who is famous in the entire awe-inspiring world, was it not Lu Chen who brought it to Osmanthus Island back then? Looking at the mountains upstairs, the snow on the top of the hill, the moon in the snow, and the beauty under the moon are all different situations. Lu Shen's 5 fingers tapped on the stone table in turn and said to himself, 15 is a stunner in astronomy, Luchitsi is a stunner in the text, and Osmanthus Island is a stunner in the landscape. Ms. Gue reminded, Teacher Lu, if you have something to say, I want see you off if it's okay. Lu Xun laughed and said, Whoever is poor is not poor, Mrs. Gue, forgive me. Jin Su was puzzled. Master called this Taoist priest Lu Xianxia? Mountain Immortal Mansion, but there is no such thing as a sect leader, even if it is the founder of the mountain, at most it is the suzerain, the leader of the mountain, etc. After all, who can do it, who dares to do it? The Jianghu sect under the mountain does not lack the suffix of the word, but it is the leader, and there is no saying that it is a master. Unless it is the 3 by Yujing who are far away and out of reach, of course, they are now the 4 descendants of Taoist ancestors, they are eligible to be honored as a certain master teacher. Could it be that the young Taoist priest in front of you who is scornful, is that Luchin? How could it be possible? I must have thought too much. A Bai Yujing teacher, how high above the sky, would knock on the door, enter the courtyard, sit here peacefully without saying anything, and even cheekily ask the master for a drink. For Jin Su, the only time in his life that he barely got in touch with Lu Chen was when Qin Pingan had personally painted a horrifying talisman in the Battle of Jianghu. What do you do? Lu Chenji ordered. Lu Chen raised his head to look at the sky and sighed for no reason. Huzuerian. Literally, it describes the beauty of a woman's appearance and dress as a god. Mrs. Gue looked solemn. Lu Xun looked at Mrs. Gue blankly but smiled suddenly. Just kidding, you can't take it seriously. Ms. Gue said indifferently, Why tell the joke if you are not serious? Lu Chen's little chicken pecked at the rice, nodded and said yes. After eating hanging at Mrs. Gui's side, he turned his head to look at the suspicious Jin Su, and exclaimed, Good name, Jin Suxing King Fushi, Zichengao Guiqiang. The old dragon city is really drenched in the Sun family's light. Jin Su cautiously said, Mr. Lu, my father's surname is Jin, so the master gave me this name. It's just another name for Osmanthus, which has the same meaning as that of Osmanthus and Guanghanxian. Lu Xun had a sincere expression, thirsty for knowledge, and asked, What's the solution? Jin Su smiled and said, Just because the sweet-scented Osmanthus is yellow like gold and the flowers are as small as millets, this is the alias. Lu Xun once again stroked his palm and said in admiration, I have learned, the world has no boundaries and I really live to learn. Mrs. Gue couldn't stand the nonsense of Master Lu, and said directly to her disciples, This Master Lu is the Baiyu Jing Lu Xun of the Qingming world. How would he know that Jin Su is an Osmanthus alias? Jin Su was shocked and quickly got up, gave a blessing and said with a trembled, Osmanthus Island Jin Su, I have seen Master Lu. Lu Xun rolled his eyes. This is boring. Reading an unseen book is like meeting good friends. Seeing books that have been read is like meeting old friends. Mrs. Gui's move was a terrible sight, just like helping girl Jin Su, turning to the last page of a book about talents and beautiful ladies that she had just read. Lu Chen lifted a palm, shook it lightly and said with a smile, Lady Jin Su will have to change her temper of looking at people in the future, or she will only let Jin Su slip away. Many of them could have been held firmly in the palm of the hand. Of course, if the son is not a godfather, the teaching is not strict. Naturally, the teacher is lazy. In addition to the inheritance of the magic technique, Mrs. Gue will also carefully carve the jade on the matter of the disciples' Taoism. If it is said that the world is like this, I am just following the crowd, am I sure to be right? Surely it must be good? Pang Dao does not seem to be necessary. Just to say that, here is the real gain and loss, who dares to make a conclusion. It can't be that Jin Su and the people of the world are right but the poor way is wrong? Lu Qinshu babbled, stood up, his figure disappeared in a flash and left Osmanthus Island. Only a book of Taoism made of gold and jade was left on the table, glowing with purple and green spirit. After shrinking one step across the sea, Lu Qin stopped abruptly, staggering forward, almost fell a dog to eat shit, raised his hand to support the crown of the road, stood on his toes, craned his neck and glanced down at the mountain and river, almost walked the wrong door. It turned out that the Confucian temple only gave Lu Zhangjiao the share of landing on 2 continents, and then he was about to send out by Yujing's 3-head teaching ceremony. However, when Lu Qin returned to the world of Haoran next time, there would be no such restrictions. After all, a Yaoguang blessed land was sent out, and there was someone who did the real credit. Lu Qin stood on the sea of clouds at the border of the sea and land under his feet, and hit a flyover-style boxing road. The 2 crackling sleeves of the Taoist robe could barely be regarded as the flowing water. Suddenly a golden rooster was independent, pinched and full of nonsense after a spell of Daoju. He came to the sky over the old dragon city of Aquarius Island in an instant, but unfortunately the sea of clouds that was created by his own hands in the past is gone. A sideways volley rolls, and when his feet fall, Lu Chen has already arrived. At the boundary of Xianxia Mountain, he bent his fingers and tapped the crown of the crown on his head lightly, casting a blind eye. Lu Chen neither went to find the contemporary female ancestor of Xianxia Mountain, nor did he go to Weifeng to find Kai Jinjian, and he was not in a hurry to buy or sell. Lu Chen glanced at the scenic Xianxia peaks and finally fell on the side of Gingyun Peak. In the vast sea of clouds, a mountain top suddenly appeared like an isolated island on the sea, and there was a man wearing that old xuanhuan robe. The immortal man, sitting on the white jade railing and drinking alone, stared blankly at somewhere, unable to shift his eyes for a long time. The bachelor man drank and drank instead of drinking the woman's brows and words. Huang Zhongho frowned, and another visitor who didn't follow the rules to walk through the gate? Really, Xianxia Mountain is a place where anyone can come and walk? Last time, I was a Qingshan guest who claimed to be Qin Pingan in the Luopa Mountain. This time he was replaced by a Taoist priest who did not know his roots and feet. It turned out that in Huang Zonghao's field of vision, there was a young Taoist priest who could not see the Tao lineage. Above the sea of clouds, he bypassed Gingyun Peak and swept away. It was not the straight line of imperial wind, but a big step. The kind of moving forward and dangling sleeves, but at the same time as Yufeng did not forget to look at the left and right. It seemed that the eyebrows and the eyes were not intent. Huang Zhongho stood up, put away his hip flask, and performed a unique secret technique of cultivating yunfeng. His figure was instantly submerged in a sea of white clouds like a cloud, and he quietly followed. Only listen to the young-looking Taoist priest from the outside country, and he has a lot of words, and it is my generation to form a golden alchemy. What kind of haze, a golden pill, azure moon and white high mountains and fast winds, unlimited clouds and water. Then I saw that Taoist priest reached a mountain called Fufeng, and started climbing up the cliff from the middle of the mountain. He lifted his body lightly, but he was a little bit airy. His posture was as strong as an ape in a mountain. Huang Zhongho has always been in hiding to see what this sneaky guy wants to do. The young Taoist seems to be a natural stubbornness. When there is no one around here, he also likes to talk to himself. He stretched out his hand to grab a lily vine. The Taoist leaned against the cliff, shook the sleeve of the Taoist robe and shook out a big pie. He stretched out his hand to catch it, chewed it and said vaguely, "The clouds are misty with a few peaks, and the green hills are piled up with green buns, lush and lush." Good poetry and poetry, taking advantage of the prosperous poetry. The talent is like a spring, the momentum is unstoppable. Come again. I once talked to the fairy monarch, my mountain ancient spiritual soil higher than Shumi Mountain. The cave house hangs from the sun and the moon, thousands of miles of clouds and water wash my eyes. I can only climb the danger without help. Dare to ask the guest officials, why is this? I was shocked. Tang Mu. It turned out that he was wearing a true figure of the 5 mountains. Huang Zhongho, who heard it in the dark, had a headache. There has always been no Fuyifeng where the monks of Xianxia Mountain lived and cultivated the way. It was a secret forbidden area. Even the ancestors of the Ancestor Temple do not know the historical origin of this peak. They only know that Dixian chose the top of the mountain as the open peak dojo, and this peak will never be selected. The crux of Xianxia Mountain's current embarrassing situation happened to be on this mountain. It is rumored that the founder of Xianxia Mountain, before the establishment of the mountain in Ao Pingzhou, found the ancient water control amulet and the undead prescription. Therefore, in the secret fairyland of Fu Temple Peak, there is the Yinfang Stone Room in Baiji Zichuan, which is Xianxia Mountain. The origin of aura. Near the top of the mountain, there is an ancient Xinfu site with many obstacles to the mountains and rivers. There are 2 round stones at the door, natural stone drum-shaped, and the monks buckle it when the monks buckle. The seals are engraved with Shenzhen and Yunzhen. Huang Zhongho was vigilant, because the Taoist priest came here by coincidence. Lu Chen looked at the stone drum at the door, sighed, and the seal was still fresh, but the old things of the gods and the immortal family's relics were gone. Farewell to the old and welcome the new year at the foot of the mountain, which is the new year, while the farewell to the old and welcome the new on the mountain is the heart. I forgot who said it. Probably the poor self. Lu Chen turned his head and smiled. Father of the Taoist cultivation Yunfeng, sneakily following the poor road all the way, in this place where the earth should not be called every day, is the Taoist intending to rob money? Huang Zhongho appeared in figure and said, "This fellow Taoist, why don't you let me go to Yunxia Mountain and see my master?" Yunxia Mountain. Zhanglu Wei Li is the preacher of Huang Zhongho. Lu Shen waved his hand. Forget it, your ancestor Yunxia is not on the mountain now, so the poor people can reminisce for no reason. Huang Zhongho choked for a while. Yunxia Old Immortal is the originator of Yunxia Mountain. Naturally, he has long since passed away. Through the opening of branches and leaves, several direct disciples have achieved the good situation of the 16 peaks of Yunxia in Aquarius. And the reason why Yunxia Mountain is close to the Dharma involves a long history of insider, because it is said that the old ancestor Yunxia was actually born in the Shenkong Temple in China, but he was not a monk but a certain kind of magic. Lu Chen's Wushu shook hands and poked lightly in the shape of a stick, smiled and said, Mu Xianxia, isn't it? Huang Zhongho didn't understand whether this Taoist priest was playing mystery, or whether it was true. Lu Chen tut, looking at the confusion of your second monk Zhang Er's head, it doesn't seem to be a fake. It seems that the old friend Yunxia, who is poor, was embarrassed to leak her roots and feet with a few pros. In fact, what is there? It's hard to tell, it should be in the preface above your Yunxia Mountain Patriarch's genealogy. Before Yangxia's ancestor left Shenkong Temple, Lu Chen had never taken a boat out to sea, and had met with the monk Quangran. Taoism and Buddhism, each said his own words, but in Lu Chen's words, the Taoist real person does not demean the Buddha. The Buddha's dragon elephant also knows, a talk, 2 cups of tea and a happy conversation. The true body of the ancestor Yunxia was the walking stick in the hands of the abbot of Shenkong Temple in her early years. Knowledge, the monk held the wooden seat, and once lightly tapped Lu Chen on the shoulder. Lu Chen didn't evade, he gave the Mu Xianxia, a fate for enlightenment in vain. Then there was the Buddhism case of Howren's future generations who beat Lu Chen out with one stick. Lu Chen raised his hand and made a gesture of raising his head and drinking. Huang Zhongho hesitated, but threw a pot of xuanhuan wine secretly brewed from Yunxia Mountain. Lu Chen lifted the mud seal, sniffed, his face was intoxicated and he squinted and smiled, it's a good drink. Huang Zhongho said, after drinking I still have to bother the real person to visit the Patriarch's hall. The outsider who trespassed at the mountain gate last time, he really went to find Kai Jingjian of Weifeng, and Huang Zhongho didn't let him be reluctant. Lu Chen nodded, that's right, Pang Dao really wants to talk to your mountain master and uncle about something business. Someone will help lead the way, lest Pang Dao hits like a headless fly. Huang Zhongho said, I hope that the real person will do what he says so as not to hurt his peace. Lu Chen smiled and said, pointing to the mansion gate, and asked, this is the most suitable place for feng shui to be used as a dojo. It's a pity that the gate has been kept closed all the time? Huang Zhongho explained, the door closed by the second-generation patriarch, the mountain master himself, also passed a decree before his death. In the future, if we monks of Yunxia Mountain, if no one is in the 5 realms, we will not be allowed to open this door and no one will be allowed to enter. Practice in the secret mansion. This matter is not a teacher. The secrets of the door are known to all monks in the whole continent. Many mountain forces who have a wrong relationship with Yunxia Mountain like to make fun of Yunxia Mountain with this matter. They ridiculed and deliberately said that there is a fairy-like town in the mansion. Zhibao, as soon as you open the door you will be invincible. Punching and kicking the gods are not a problem. Hearing this, Lu Chen was choked by the wine, wiped the corners of his mouth with his sleeves and said with a smile, it's really a master who pits his master and his grandchildren. It's a good intention. It's hard work. It is nothing but hope that you younger monks can continue to work hard, practice well, no matter how you should cultivate a jade puddle. When the door is opened and occupy this mansion with great concentration, you may be able to create more immortals along the way. Huang Zhongho was silent. Lu pondered for a moment, holding the pot in one hand and pinching the trick with the other. Since the person who needs to tie the bell to untie the bell, then the person who closes the door is necessary to open the door. Huang Zhongho shook his head and said, after the ancestor master soldier was disbanded, he did find the reincarnated person outside the mountain, but unfortunately the ancestor master was still unable to open his body. He stopped at the Dragon Gate realm and he was relieved again. There will be no news after that. Lu Xun nodded, and stopped deducing the way in way out of the second-generation ancestor of Yunxia Mountain. He shook his hand and said, the mud cow enters the sea, how can I find it? The most fear of monasticism is that there is no way out, and it is best to have a way to be a man. There are some old sayings that have been passed on from mouth to mouth. It is of course reasonable to be older than the elderly. For example, if one's ancestors accumulate virtue, they can benefit their descendants. Huang Zhongho began to believe that the young Taoist in front of him was probably an extraordinary man with profound Taoism and a great connection with Yunxia Mountain. Lu Chen turned and looked at the surging sea of clouds at Gung Yunfeng, drank the wine silently. He was full of poems and songs, and he had accumulated too much. For a moment he didn't know which passages and sentences to turn out, and he shook his arms around the Taoist friend next to him. Long experience. Huang Zhongho mistakenly thought that this foreign minister who had a good face and returned to the original, was returning to his old home sadly and not seeing his acquaintance. Lu Qin threw the empty hip flask away from the cliff and raised his hand again. Huang Zhongho was also looking at the magnificent sea of clouds over the mountains by his farming cloud peak. Hearing the Tao Chang coughing several times, he realized that the other party kept that lift. With the hand gesture, Huang Zhongho had to toss another pot of xuanhuan wine. Didn't he really meet a liar who was drinking? Lu Xun said, many people don't drink just because they don't like to drink. Many people don't drink because they can't drink. Huang Zhongho nodded in agreement. The previous tragic battle that caused the mountains and rivers of the continent to sink, so many people who did not drink began to drink, and it also made more people who liked to drink stop drinking. Lu Qin nodded and shook the jug in his hand. He was indeed a good drinker. Sir Hidden Officer has a picking eye which has always been good. It's not a waste of money to walk through Xianxia Mountain after untold hardships. Huang Zhongho carefully brewed his words and asked, really people visit this place to solve our problems and solve problems in Xianxia Mountain? Lu Qin nodded and said, of course, Poor Dao has an old relationship with Xianxia Mountain. Poor Dao is a famous nostalgia on the mountain. Secondly, someone asked Poor Dao to get out of the mountain to help Xianxia Mountain tide over the difficulties. I have to come. Huang Zhongho asked tentatively, if this is the case, why doesn't the real person go directly to our mountain lord? Lu Xun chuckled, a worldly expert with a state of impoverished Dao that towers above the clouds, with a turquoise temperament and a pale heart, how can he do things with common sense? Already regarded the other party as a land fairy in the game world, but when the other party said so, Huang Zhongho was a little bit confused. Lu Qin felt that the fire was almost over, so he picked up the hip flask and randomly clicked on the mansion door behind him. With a word, it was a leak of the secret for Huang Zhongho. This mansion for Xianxia Mountain is actually a guard in steel. As long as you open the door, Xianxia Mountain will not only solve your worries, but also get a rich inheritance gift, year after year of accumulation of luck. This opening, Huang Zhongho, imagine yourself, you have to be what, a lot of luck? The only thing Xianxia Mountain has to do next is to lay a large formation to take good care of this abundant aura that bursts like a flood, otherwise it will be instantly stunned by the tide of the aura. What a big joke. Huang Zhongho looked unbelievable. Can't believe it. Is it really so simple? According to the previous avenues of my own patriarch hall, to solve this huge dilemma, it is nothing more than to start from three aspects, at least two of them. First, a monk of the upper five realms is needed, which is why the mountain lord has been in retreat in recent years, seeking a way to break the bottleneck. Secondly, Xianxia Mountain can become a sect, and it can be approved by the Confucian Temple, which can give more luck. Although it still treats the symptoms and not the root cause, it can delay the deterioration of the situation. Finally, we need a heavy treasure of at least a semi-fairy rank, which can gather and stabilize the aura of heaven and earth. Humanity, time, and location. If the three can be combined, of course it is the best, but from the current point of view, Xianxia Mountain is doomed to achieve nothing in the short term. Just to say that after a great war, the half-Xian soldiers are now almost selling at the sky-high price that was once equal to the immortal soldiers, especially the Jinshan treasures other than this type of offensive. The relative price was low in the past, but now it is even more expensive in Howran. Rare and precious. Xianxia Mountain went around to ask about the relationship, went to other continents to inquire about this, but ended up hitting a wall everywhere, almost always the same answer: there is no sale. This is also the reason why Xianxia has not been able to make a move for a long time. Otherwise, it is possible to buy a half-celestial soldier by smashing the pot and selling the iron to collect money and borrow money. Lu Qin smiled and said, someone actually passed that Kai Jinjian a long time ago and reminded you of the way to break the game in Xianxia Mountain, but Kai Jinjian was kept in the dark and probably heard some hints, but she never understood it, you guys. The spectators were also unaware of what they were doing, so they couldn't get in. They ended up sitting on Jinshan but almost starved to death. It's not that the person deliberately watched your jokes, but your Xianxia Mountain's Taoism is fundamental. It's close to Zen, and of course he can't do it too much. Otherwise it's just superfluous, which is equal to unbuckling and buckling, procrastinating and paying off debts, but it's not beautiful. Huang Zhongho's Wei said, I implore the real person to speak clearly. He still didn't believe that opening a door on this Fufeng would make the entire Xianxia Mountain worry-free. Furthermore, the monk's violation of the ancestral precepts is not a trivial matter on the mountain. Lu Xun sighed, this Huang Daoyu has a cheerful temperament, and he will give him wine when he asks for it, and he will give 2 pots as soon as he asks for it. Unfortunately, this mind is a bit bewildered by the drinking. Lu Xun had to patiently explain, Kai Jingjian didn't have a deep blessing in his early years. Didn't he get an expert saying that break and stand like the help of the gods? What is broken? Who is God talking about? It's nothing more than the simplest break-in. The person who is like the help of the gods is of course Mr. Qi, the Confucian sage of Lizhu Dongtian. The reason why he said this idiom in his early years is who he can be if it is not Zhou Zi. The puzzle and the answer are given. Do you still expect Zhou Zi to hold your head and speak loudly in your ears? Huang Zhongho always bends down while listening to the man's words. Wait until the Taoist stopped speaking. Huang Zhongho straightened up this time, took a deep breath, made up his mind and went back to talk to the mountain lord about the matter. The mountain chief did not dare to open the door, he came. In the dark, Huang Zhongho believes that this Taoist's words are not jokes, nor is it a sinister act to harm Yunxia Mountain. Even if both the mountain lord and the master are opposed, Huang Zhongho will only look for a lucky day, bathe and change clothes, go to the ancestor hall to worship the incense, make an oath of the heart, and frankly confess the matter with the ancestors of the past. If it is wrong, just ask for any consequences. Let me Huang Zhongho be able to bear it alone. Lu Xun nodded and started boasting again, I am a good alcoholic. No wonder that half of the poor students who are not named want to have another drink with you. Huang Zhongho smiled and said, even so, the younger generation is grateful to the real person, but the rules are there. You still need to ask a real person to visit the Patriarch Hall. Lu Xun tut and said, good boy, the monkey is good, you must have a good road, and the poor way will put the words here today, 1 spit and 1 nail. Huang Zhongho inevitably feels a little guilty. This real person treats each other so frankly, but he wants to treat the gentleman's belly with a villain, and asks the mountain lord to personally check the identity of the other party, seeking a so-called foolproof. Lu Xun wanted to caress his beard and laughed. Oh, he remembered that he was young and didn't have a beard. After all, he was not as old as Dao Chang's son in the great profound capital, so he rubbed his chin. Pan Dao is a real gentleman, a real man. Be careful, gentleman generous. Huang Zhongho was speechless. Lu Xun lightly stomped his feet and smiled. Don't think it is a trivial thing to build a mountain protection array that prevents the surging of spiritual energy from escaping. Once the palace gate is opened, the momentum is not small, it is mighty, and it is equivalent to a big sword. The immortal asked Jian Yunxia Mountain indiscriminately, and if he was careless, the entire Fu Temple peak would be broken on the spot, but it was equal to the second questioning sword. The rocks were splashing, the flying sword was like rain, and the remaining Yunxia Mountain 15 peaks, and finally I can leave a few hills suitable for cultivation and I can count on the poor road. Well, it's not bad, but most of it can be left. It is the aura accumulated in the cave for many years. 7 or 8 out of 10 you must make wedding clothes for others. Yes, it is estimated that within a few years, within a 10,000-mile radius of Yunxia Mountain large and small, near the top of Xinjia Mountain, and the Huangliang country with a yellow beam next to it, you will sincerely send you something similar to the unselfishness of justice. Golden plaque, let's talk to express our thanks. Huang Zhongho heard of this, but he was relieved, otherwise it was like a beautiful dream of yellow beams, which made him unable to believe it was true. Then the question is coming, what's the answer to this matter? Lu Xun asked and answered, throwing out the empty jug in his hand and stomped again, it's in your Huang Zonghao's 2 jugs of wine. If Huang Zhongho only gave a pot of wine, Yunxia Mountain would not have this treatment. The hip flask that was thrown into the air, and the hip flask that had already fallen to the ground hung the sky and one on the ground, followed by Lu Xun stomping his feet. In an instant the Yunxia Mountain boundary was surging, and I saw the 2 hip flasks suddenly. It is as large as a mountain, as if there is a universe in the pot, each with a Dao Qi ups and downs, and finally a yin and yang fish pattern is condensed, slowly circling, just covering the entire Yunxia Mountain, and the array is falling to the ground one after another, like a painting of ink. The long scroll spreads on the ground and then disappears without a trace. This vision of heaven and earth swallowing mountains and rivers is fleeting. In a Yunxia Mountain, apart from Huang Zonghao's witnessing this magnificent sight, there are only 2 people who can perceive the strangeness. One is the green juniper peak Kai Jingjian, and the other is a young child who is staring at the sky, and neither of them rely on them. The realm depends on Dao fate. Lu Xun pointed to one place and smiled with Huang Zhongho. That kid with good aptitude will have to grab Zhenjianfeng. It will be of great use in the future. You will have the next mountain owner to choose Xianxia mountain. As for the next mountain lord, of course it is the golden core cultivator of cultivating Cloud Peak in front of him. Lu Chen moved a few steps, patted Huang Zhongho on the shoulder and smiled. People who can ignore someone's initiative to persuade someone to drink, and then threaten someone to drink a pot and spit 2 pots, not many people. Will be 100 years at most. You can brag about it with people everywhere. Wait for Huang Zhongho to recover, the Taoist is no longer visible. Huang Zhongho feels lost, he still doesn't know the name of this real person. In the Lake of Heart, the voice of the real person resounded, the name of the poor road is anonymous. Huang Zhongho felt helpless. How did he explain the matter to the Patriarch Hall afterwards? And the benefactor who helped his family Yangxian survive the catastrophe, was a foreign Taoist with the Tao name, Anonymous? The realm of the gods, the Taoist temple is like a forest, and the avenue of the ancestors in the mountain is holding a 10-year urn ceremony, but compared to the previous Taoist rituals, there are now 2 more rituals. Outsiders. One is an official from the Dali accompanying Capital Department of Ceremony who came to the Divine Envoy sect, and the other is a Daelu under the Chongshu Bureau of Dali Capital, who is responsible for recording all the Taoist priests who have obtained the exorcism. Lu Chen has no objection to this, but when it is bigger, it is nothing more than a clear rule of the king, a secrecy of the law, the rule of the law, and the rule of the king. Going deeper and deeper, it is said that after the rule of law in the country violates the prohibition and violation of the law of the Tao constrains people's minds when they first move in delusional thoughts. On the hill far away from the ancestor hall of the gods, in one of the humble little Taoist temples with the Kawaguan plaque hanging, an old Taoist priest is leading a group of little Taoists, doing that evening class, behavely recite a Taoist classic, old rote, young hard to memorize. Lu Chen sighed with his head in front of the door, and walked away listening badly, and shook his head and walked inside the Taoist temple after holding his hands. I saw a little Tao boy sweeping the floor and endorsing his book. He didn't memorize smoothly. He always memorized wrong, just like turning a book. If he memorized a mistake, he had to start over and recite a whole page. Lu Chen didn't bother the little Tao boy. Independent cleansing, he walked under the tree and shook it lightly. It is not easy to be a Taoist priest on the fairy mountain. Many of the trees in the mountains are always green all the year round. The fallen leaves are intermittent, and there is no stopping. It is uneasy, unlike the Taoist temples under the mountain. Only autumn is the most tiring. After winter you can be lazy. As a result, when the little Dao Tong looked back, the good guy where's the bad guy, there was full of fallen leaves that swayed the ground, and the little Dao Tong rushed over with his broom when he was angry, and waited until the young Taoist turned his head. Xiaodaotong waited up, and he was definitely unable to beat it, so he landed on the broom and pretended to sweep the ground. Lu Chen asked with a smile, "Little guy, did you teach urns? Now that urns have been born, how many times have you added urns?" Xiao Dao Tong snorted, "It's not the so-called family biography or private urn, which is given if you have money, not to mention that you have no money. If you have money, can you sweep the floor here?" The brothers of the same age in the Taoist temple are not only rich in the family, but they have received extra attention from the master. They have never washed the latrine and toilet, so they can't do it by themselves. Now it's fine. Picking manure and going to the vegetable garden, practice makes perfect. A good hand. Lu Chen sat on the railing. Behind him was a small pond with some carps, arms around his chest, and said, "The Tao is drowning in dung, it's good." Xiao Dao Tong was said to have been sad. He raised his head and stared. Seeing that the smelly Taoist who did not know where he came from was raising his arm and bending it again and again, Xiao Dao Tong understood the other party's reminder, and had to lower his head. "Go, boring and sweeping the floor as expected," the Taoist said to himself. Pan Dao's tendon flesh is all the hard work of planting trees, cutting trees and replanting trees all the year round. Naturally he has great skill and is usually strong. Han can't get close to the poor Dao's body at all. Xiaodaotong whispered, "Master Patriarch is right. You said it was just a fart." Lu Chen asked with a smile, "Why? Isn't it all the same sentence and the same reason?" Xiaodaotong added gravity, sweeping the fallen leaves flying around. "It can be the same, of course it is not the same. Anyway, I understand the truth, but I can't say it." Lu Chen asked, "Is it similar to the phrase, 'If the world learns from me, it is like entering the way of the devil'?" Xiao Dao Tong raised his head. "What the hell? Which Gaojin said in which book?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "It was said by a Buddhist monk." Actually, Lu Chen already knew about Dao Tong's wonderful thinking, and the answer in his mind was quite interesting. It was indeed because Xiao Dao Tong couldn't say it. Xiao Dao Tong said, "You still know a lot." Looking down at the fallen leaves on the ground, Xiao Dao Tong slandered in his heart at the same time that he was improper. Lucian asked, "What's your name?" The little Dao Tong was listless, lowered his head and swept the fallen leaves into the dustpan, and whispered, "The chief of the road called me Yu, it's the Yu of the Yushur. It's just that Xiaodaotong didn't say that this is the name that master helped to choose. Talking to an outsider is not guilty of talking about this." Lucian smiled and said, "I will give the urn in the future. Is there anything I want to do?" Xiao Dao Tong raised the broom in his hand and pointed to the direction of the Patriarch's hall, but quickly put down the broom angrily. He was disrespectful. If he was seen by the master, he would be miserable. The fine copy of the scriptures could be copied most of the night, and he stepped on the fallen leaves in the dustpan. Stepped a little harder and then continued to sweep the fallen leaves. Xiao Dao Tong said casually, "We Taoist temples are poor, and when I get rich in the future, I will help the statue of the in the Patriarch's hall to be gilded. It is a brand new clothes too. Just put a layer of gold powder on it, it's fine." Lucian said, "Ayu, you are so sincere, and your ancestor master hasn't been able to show up quickly to be worthy of your innocent heart? Leave me as your ancestor master, so I must show up immediately and have a good chat with you." Sentence. The little Dao Tong was so annoyed that he raised his broom and pointed at the strange Taoist who didn't have any rules and said angrily, "I've been holding you back for a long time, it's almost enough, otherwise I'll call my brother to come and beat you." Xiao Dao Tong quickly added, "Brothers?" Lucian was too happy. He supported the railing with both hands, shook his legs, knocked on the railing lightly on his back heel and asked with curiosity, "It's weird, why are you such a big mountain and so many Taoist temples? The temple of the Patriarch has such a wooden Taoist temple, which is the poorest." Xiao Dao Tong said angrily, "It's up to you. In fact, this problem, let alone oneself, is the brothers and sisters, and the uncles are very curious. I only heard from the master that a Taoist priest has 2 veins and wears different crowns, which is not common in the entire Howren world. For example, if the little Taoist boy really becomes a urn in the future, wearing a Taoist crown on his head will be a lotus crown. With the gods, the Taoist crown of the heavenly sovereign is different." Lucian smiled and said, "I know the reason. It is because Qi Tianjun received a kind of preaching favor from your ancestor master. When he became the sect master, at first he was thinking of Taoist priests with 2 veins, and a bowl of water was smooth. Later it was discovered that it was impossible to do so, and there were many hidden dangers. On the contrary, the Taoism in the mountains of your line became less and less. Later, Qi Tianjun had to change a little way only to secretly relieve the incense of your line, and found out it still didn't work. As a result, the entire Aquarius continent failed to do what he wanted. At any rate, there was a Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown who founded a sect outside the mountain. It was not until very later that he tried to barely understand a principle, what is the natural way of Taoism. It turned out that he did the wrong thing kindly, and then finally there is a King Liangzong in Luzhou and Beiju. Lucian pointed to the big tree, "All things are like grass and trees with prosperity and death. The heaven and the earth can last for a long time. Because they don't live by themselves, they can live forever." The little Taoist was so confused that he would not talk to each other, lest he might show his cowardice. He suddenly asked, "Since you are a Taoist priest, why don't you call yourself Apo or Tao?" Lucian smiled and said, "The poor are not poor, the thieves have money. Xiaodaotong is a little envious. I don't have any entanglements on my body, and I can't travel far and wide." Lucian waved his hand, "You want to make a mistake, in saying that I am a cultivator. It just so happens that everything is a dog and Tao is in the world." Lucian raised his palm, slowly lowered, and repeated the last 4 words only with a subtle pause, "The way is in the sky down." Xiao Dao Tong said, "You talk about yours and I will sweep mine." Lucian asked, "I said that the vegetation has life and death. Everyone knows that the big tree next to you is still alive. Then I am going to ask you, what do you think of the fallen leaves in the dustpan by your feet? Think, is it life or death?" Xiao Dao Tong shook his head. Lucian raised his hands and hugged the back of his head. It's not a boastful thing. The most dangerous time in my life to talk to people about the Tao, TSK, it's really dangerous, I almost can't be a Taoist priest." Xiao Dao Tong raised his head and smiled. "Was beaten by someone." Lucian said solemnly, You want to make a difference again. I was asking a very old and senior Taoist priest. Guess what? In fact, the earliest Taoist priest in the world said it was the monk." Xiao Dao Tong hugged the broom and blinked. Lu Qin showed a dazed expression, tilted his head back 3 times and whispered, "Don't talk about this fish pond." He watched a pot of water, 88,000 insects. I and the Taoist priest have traveled together for several years in the world. During the period I looked at the size, number, length, front and back, life and death, but I was still not convinced, and the man took me to a strange and weird world. The world is vast and profound, there is no universe and no universe. Regardless of possessions, there are countless small worlds, so many creatures, really like the sands of the Ganges River, and I am one of them. After a lot of hardships, spending countless hours and successful cultivation, if I stay here, I will be there. Just a sigh can make thousands of stars disappear, and raise your hand, you can make hundreds of. Ascension realm cultivators all die, and finally I start to travel far and have been to so-called xianxia. In the world I have seen countless weird creatures, and I don't know the past thousands of years. I have chosen to sleep and sleep, and I don't know how many thousands of years. When I wake up, the stars that seem to be unchanging in the past are gone. The last certain one day when the sky suddenly opened up, I followed that path as if engulfing half of the world's endless Tao Chi, spells and magical powers. I bumped away and finally was able to leave that place. As a result, at that time, Xiaodaotong heard that Mr. Shu was telling the story, so he hurriedly asked, "What happened?" Lu Xun smiled and said, "Foresee the funeral and listen to the next time to break down." Xiaodaotong sighed and understood, "Just treat me as owing you 3 pennies, okay?" Lu Xun raised his arms and asked with a smile, "Ayo, if we get a bag out of a mosquito bite, do we like to stroke our nails like this?" Xiaodaotong raised a finger like a cross and smiled, "I like to swipe twice." Lu Xun smiled and nodded and pointed to himself, "That me is the redness and swelling on my arm that was bitten by a mosquito. I was crushed to death by a random finger." The little Dao Tong opened his mouth wide and finally couldn't help holding out his thumb. "Good story. It is really worth the 3 cents. Lu Xun smiled and said, "That's why I can't break through. Master is the most tired and lazy, and he doesn't want to explain to me. What can I do as a disciple? I can only find some answer myself." The little Dao Tong held a broom in his arms, and was speechless for a long time. He only felt that the story told by Dao Chang was not too exciting. There was no scholarly fox charm and no real person on the scene. It was a bit weird and sounded good. I'm not too willing to tell the brothers and apprentices. After all, it took me 3 cents. The little Tao Tong finally couldn't help but exclaimed, "Where does the Taoist master come from?" Lu Xun smiled and beckoned, "It's true that palmistry is a must. You come, spread your hands and help you see your luck." Xiaodaotong immediately became vigilant. "This is a long line to catch a big fish in the final analysis, or is it to cheat me?" Lu Xun complained, "No money." Xiaodaotong asked, "Is it because you have seen bad palmistry so you have to charge extra money so that you can lose money and eliminate disasters?" Lu Xun took a breath of air, his own Dao pulse. "How come out such a prodigy? In the future, it will be a good material for setting up a fortune-telling booth with me." Xiaodaotong hesitated for a moment, and finally he looked sad, pursed his mouth, put down his broom and said goodbye to the Daoist chief, hit a door, then bends down, lifted the dustpan with both hands and dropped the fallen leaves in the distance. Lu Xun sighed. The child originally wanted to ask his surname, but the words came to his lips, and he felt that it was unnecessary. When the child dumped the fallen leaves of a dustpan, he turned his head and looked around. The young Taoist sitting on the railing was gone. Lu Xun had sneaked up to the threshold of the Taoist temple, and waved at the old Taoist master who was shabby and endorsed in that robe. The old Taoist saw it for the first time, smiled and shook his head, continued to endorse, and for the second time he saw the young Taoist priest who was still at the threshold. Beckoning vigorously over there, the old Taoist frowned slightly, and his eyes signaled that he was temporarily unavailable. When he saw it for the 3rd time, the old Taoist, who was the master of one view, got up with anger, strode towards the door and was about to reprimand. In a word, I never thought that his opponent would touch his sleeve with one hand, grab his own hand with the other, and pat. The old master doesn't need to bow his head and weigh it up. Alas, it's some yellow and white things under the mountain, nothing more, it's just lighter. The young Taoist priest took out another handful of copper coins, and continued to pat it on the master of Laoguan. The latter lowered his head slightly, his eyes narrowed, his eyes lit up. "Huh?" Turned out to be snowflake money on 3 mountains. The old Guanju waited for a while and saw that the other party no longer touched his sleeves. He lightly clenched his fists, twisted his wrists and put them in the sleeves without dialogue. He pulled the other party away and asked directly, "How about fellow Taoists? Do you know that there is a private urn for this autumn view of the poor Tao? Do you understand the rules here?" The implication is that this Taoist private urn is no better than the official urn of the Zongmen. Now the Dali court is strictly governed and has received a private urn. In the future it will be okay to set up roadside stalls, but it is difficult to make it to the elegant hall. In short, it is difficult to deceive the noble silver of the emperor, generals and senior officials. The young Taoist priest smiled knowingly. If you don't understand, you can come? I just used it to show off those who don't know how to do it. Old Guanju sighed, stretched out his and gently twisted. Dao friends understand the rules but don't understand the market, you have to add money. Old Guanju lowered his voice again and said, I've said it, no refund. Lucian smiled and said, just add money, I just paved the way for Ayu. The old Taoist was stunned. Are you the long-lost father of Ayu? Lucian smiled and said, guess the subject. The old Taoist did not want to let go of this bully and continued to persuade him. You know, fellow Taoists, the Taoist Taoism of the poor Tao is small, but the quota of one earned student every 10 years cannot be escaped. This was set by Qi Tianjun early. After all, Ayu is still young. There are a lot of uncles and brothers in the view, and it is his turn in the year of the monkey. The Zongmen Zhu Shirtang has strict assessments, and no one will be able to teach it. Once the recommended person fails to pass the urn, and the place will be lost in the next 10 years. But in this view of Qiuhao, they are all their own family members and monks, regardless of the quality of the temperament. The ancestors said it. The rule is, if someone has outstanding merits, those who are superior in Taoism can also be promoted to the urn. I really want to say that we can teach urns by ourselves. It is not true compared to that of the ancestors, but the identity of the urns is also true. Well, when the time comes to wear a lotus crown, he will not be a real Taoist priest. These are not the idiots who came out indiscriminately with a mouth. What do you think of fellow Taoists? The young Taoist nodded his head under the view of the old view, but he just didn't pay. Urgent. Lucian looked at this old master who had cleaned his robes, and then looked at his heart full of thoughts to coat Grand Master with a layer of gold, and the entire Grand Master Hall must be renovated, how the scenery will be restored, how to look back and look good. The neighboring Taoist temples came to show their presence, and in the future they will be able to stand up a bit when offering their ancestors to their ancestors. After a series of thoughts, Lucian was a little bit dumbfounded for a while. Lucian patted the old Taoist on the shoulder and said with a smile, Okay, don't cry poorly with me. I heard my grandparents crying, so I told Qizhen when I turned around and asked him to open a separate one. The urn conferring ceremony gave us Ayu a real urn identity. Listening to this young Taoist priest's rebellious assholes, the old master was so angry that he would punch him in the chest. Shut up. Lucian moved sideways and avoided the punch. It wasn't that he felt shameless when he was beaten by the punch. He was really worried that the punch would fall on the spot and it would be bad for the stereotypes. Lucian stretched out his hand and said with a hippie smile, This is this. Tan collapsed? Give me back the money. Old Guanza's face was pale, he sighed, and he was about to find out the money that was in his pocket and said, The Taoist friend is stingy. Lucian smiled and said, Oh? The next moment the old watcher rubbed his eyes vigorously. The young Taoist in front of him wearing a lotus crown. And that lotus crown, whether it is a true Taoist or a fake Taoist priest, absolutely dare not pretend to be a Taoist priest in the world. Who dares to imitate this Taoist temple without authorization, let alone wear it on the head without permission? What's more, Xuanhuan is still in the realm of the gods. Therefore at the next moment, the old view master burst into tears and excitement. He staggered back a few steps and knelt down with a thump, and then began to kowtow for his patriarch. The old Taoist's lips trembled and he couldn't say a word. Sorry, his face was full of tears, but he couldn't help it, so he started to cry. For so many years, from the incumbent master of self-qualification, and then push all the way up, generations of masters, as if they have cultivated the Tao for a lifetime, have only cultivated a big poor character, and the days are suffering. Lucian squatted down and patted the old Taoist on the shoulder. He was so poor that he could not touch the flesh. He smiled and comforted softly, I know, it's not easy for everyone. The old Taoist cried so sad that he finally remembered that he was squatting next to his grandpa, the head teacher of Baiyujing, and quickly wiped away his tears. As soon as he was about to get up, he looked up and found that the grandpa was sitting on the ground somehow. The old view master shrank his head and shoulders tremblingly, and sat on the ground together. Lucian just stood up and said with a smile, After leaving, remember to wait until Qizhen comes back from the barren world. You go and tell Qizhen that Ayu is now my direct disciple, let him figure it out by himself. Old Guanju nodded vigorously and once again dazzled, there was no trace of his ancestor. Lan Shin traveled across the continent, passing by the sea between the two continents, looking down. Fish shape makes water, human shape makes Tao. Remember that back then, it seemed that I had heard a question and answer with my own ears. Mr. said, the road cannot float in the sea. The student answered, why bother to study and then study? Lu Qin raised his head and glanced at the sky, suddenly speeding up. Yufeng's figure stopped, and then dropped his figure, looking straight down at the mountains and rivers. Coming to the outside of the Patriarch Hall of the Patriarch of Mazongmuyi Mountain, Lu Qin only changed his appearance slightly. Soon several ancestors came here. Wei Yusong was very surprised and asked softly, I don't know, the real person is here. Lu Qin coughed and said straight to the point, that gift magic weapon given by poor Dao back then? Several ancestors looked at each other. Wei Yusong was the first to notice something was wrong, and said angrily, cut him. Damn, how dare you pretend to be a real fire dragon and come to Muyi Mountain to make a ghost? That magic weapon, once the sect celebration was over, the previous suzerain had already returned it to the fire dragon in private. Not to mention, Zhu Quan said the general process. Her father, that is, the previous suzerain, and the old real person, both of you push me. I was very polite, and the old man smiled at this. One must be given, one must not be accepted, one is hard-hearted, and the other is shameless. It is probably such a picture of the kindness of the senior and the understanding of etiquette. In the end, the old real man really couldn't get rid of it. He patted his suzerain on the shoulder, and his eyes were pleased, almost like Dao He Zongman, who can be regarded as an old real person who divides the account between 3 and 7. The real person promises that in the next few hundred years, the 10 days of each year will be ignored elsewhere. Anyway, it is not suitable for a sword repairman to come here to ask about swords. Simply put, about MO is just the phrase, I am familiar on the road, you Maishan patriarch, I am covered? Lu Xinlu is so lucky, he deserves to be the real fire dragon. Shrinking the ground in one step, he came directly to the Qingliangzong of his own Dao. It is a pity that the direct disciple is not in the mountains now. Aloft, white walls and glazed tiles, and hanging bells on the 4 corners under the eaves. Besides, there are huts in the mountains, even monks' residences. For a Zongzi head fairy family, whether it is the size of the site or the atmosphere of the mansion, it is indeed a bit too shabby. Fortunately, He Xiaoyang still has a small cave in his hand. Otherwise, as a master and patriarch, I will have a handful of bitter tears. In fact, Chen Pinggan's success in Xiandan City is the most suitable for her female disciple. Beautiful lady, a secluded residence in the mountains, holding a whisk in her hand, complement each other. It's just that Lu Qin dared to ask for it. Even if he succeeded, he didn't dare to give it away. At that time, Qin Pinggan would definitely be chased and chopped down, and it is estimated that there is no room for discussion. A sword light lit up in front of his eyes, not intending to hurt people, and the warning was even stronger. Lu Qin staggered, cursing, good disciple, dare to deceive the master and destroy the ancestor. The female cultivator hurriedly retracted the flying sword, and the person swayed and almost hit her flying sword by herself. If the sword was not retracted quickly, it would cause her to change from scary to murder. The woman said in a deep voice, do you know the consequences of a Taoist trespassing into the Qingliang sect? I saw the young Taoist slap his head, and an ordinary lotus crown appeared and hurriedly said, my family, my family. The woman was stunned, a fellow Taoist? Lu Xin answered the wrong question and smiled, it seems that our sect master, he is the most important and the most distressed to you. This young woman's crown is named Ganji. Exactly half of a citrus? She rolled her eyes. Is it an irony? Do you like poking your heart? Master is the most partial and he is least welcome. 2 senior sisters, they were a colorful elk and a nearby object at the meeting ceremony when they came to Master's door. They came to their side, well, just a few oranges. They are the most common kind of oranges in Yamashita market. At the beginning she still felt that Master had other profound meanings, but it was actually a panacea. When she chewed slowly and finished eating, there was really no mystery. The only unusual treatment was that every time Master went out and went down the mountain, he returned to the mountain. At that time she would bring her a few oranges. Lu Qin turned his head and looked at one place and said with a smile, Tian de Fuyuan, even me who is his junior would be envious. Master is not on the mountain now and she is going to Wuxialover for a long trip. She first informed her colleagues to come here quickly, and then following the sight of the young Taoist priest, Ganji saw the fence in the distance. There was once Mr. Li. I was invited by my teacher's father to the mountains to help them preach and teach karma. And before going down the mountain, Mr. Li personally planted some flowers and plants, including creeper, morning glory, and a bowl lotus in a small water tank. It is strange to say that it is an ordinary bowl lotus, not a fairy flower, but when the flowers bloom, there will be green water spring waves in the small water tank, and water will come out of the standing leaves, blooming 300 layers of beauty. Lu Xun sat down in the corridor, stretched out his fingers and shook it lightly, and the bell shook, ding ding dong dong, crisp and sweet. A kind of fish love is different. Some people like to fish and eat fish, some people just like to feed fish. Except for the female champion Ganji, all the suzerains who stayed in the mountains have already rushed here. Lu Xun lifted his cheek with one hand, startled, suddenly remembered something and asked, I heard that the great sword fairy in the north by Chang has ever said something to He Xiaoyang? It seems to mean that He Xiaoyang should not expect to be able to ascend to the Ascension realm in Beiju Luzhou in this life. Lu Xun was just about to stand up, and at this moment he faintly saw the fence. Senior brother seemed to be standing there many years ago, smiling and shaking his head to his side, and he was clearly saying something, and he returned to Bai Yujing, be careful about the future. In a certain questioning sword, you must protect your senior brother Yu Do and a Bai Yujing. You're tuning in to this Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.